decade, Saturdays and Illegal Curve have been synonymous with one another. With insight, analysis, and interviews regarding the Winnipeg Jets, the Manitoba Moose, and all around the NHL, here are Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg, and your host, Drew Mindell. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show starts now.
Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. For all those joining us live this morning at the Hockey for All Center, online on our social media platforms, and wherever you may be tuning in from, we say good morning, universe, and welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Alongside Dave Minuk, with producer Tim doing the great job like he always does, I'm your host, Drew Mindell, here for the next couple of hours, talk everything to do with the Winnipeg Jets. Ezzy, away from the show, we wish him well as he continues to recover from his rhinoplasty that he had earlier this week. He's on the way to recovery. So you know that's the important part, is that he soon will be back to I'd say full strength, but maybe just strength in Ezzy's case. So I mean, we look forward to welcoming him back next week on the program. All things hopeful, it heads in that trajectory.
Yeah, and Ezzy and I were supposed to drive together, which we did. He managed to drive me this morning, so that was nice of him. He will recover at home, and he wasn't at full strength. He didn't want to come here and not be 100%.
That's good.
As he always gives 100%, so he didn't
right.
want to be able to not give 100%.
It's not a playoff game, so he didn't want to play at 65 or 70%.
That's right.
Like he may have. My favorite part of that, and I mean, it just exemplifies how like everyone who watches the show regularly knows that I give Ezzy the gears a little bit, and he gives them back to me. But he is the world's nicest guy, because he actually, he had arranged. He was planning on being on the show this morning, and so the plan was that he was going to pick you up, drive you here, be on the show together, and do all that. Yeah. And he did everything about that, except he just didn't come in. He drove you here, dropped you off, and went back home, like driving Miss Daisy, basically.
Yeah, but I think that unfortunately for Ezzy, had he been back, had he come in those doors, I think he would have felt the need to be on the show.
No question.
I think as a result, he chose to sit this one out, or drive home, I should say. But it doesn't matter. Lots to talk about. There's Guy right there. Hey, Guy. And for the record, that Guy is his name, not just a random guy, for those who are wondering. You'll recognize Guy, actually, because he's the security guard who's always in the videos when the Jets are arriving. He's always in the background, so you'll know Guy very well. And we've got the Zamboni behind us. We've got producer Tim in front of us. Yeah. So things are off to a cooking start here.
A great Saturday morning at the Hockey for All Center. People are going to filter in as the Jets development camp is, of course, continuing. You saw them at the Bomber game last night, or I don't know if you did, but I did. And Timmy, we were both at the game last night. And so they're going to be on the ice. So a lot of people, I'm sure, are going to be here, as it always is. It becomes a real popular place to go on this Saturday morning, early in the summer. Very Canadiana to be in the rink watching these young players as they begin their quest to become NHL regulars. Free agency, it seems like it was weeks ago, but it was really only Monday. And you did yeoman's work, as you always do, covering it and covering the draft on the weekend for Illegal Curve and illegalcurve.com. Well, some of us were off vacationing with the family, yours truly being one of those people, but good job on your part.
Thank you.
As sort of expected from the Winnipeg Jets perspective, a quiet free agency day. Yeah. It's almost, lather, rinse, repeat when it comes to the Jets and free agency. Is they're in on player A, they're in on player B, they're in on player C. Those players are down to two teams, and they're going to make their decision. And it seems like, at least lately, not always, but lately seems like they go to a different team. Sean Monahan being the one I'm really primarily speaking about there. Jets obviously were in on him. They wanted to sign him. They made him a strong offer by all accounts, and he ends up taking the money, probably more money, more term from Columbus, and going there. There's a lot of people online who are saying the Jets actually dodged a lot of bullets here in not making some of those signings, that some of those signings aren't going to age well. And free agency is always inflationary, and it always,
especially in Winnipeg.
It always costs teams a lot of money and a lot of term, and maybe not for the better of that team. So what's your perspective, I guess, on the Jets and how free agency unfolded earlier this week? Are they... did they dodge some bullets? Are they fortunate that they maybe missed out on some of those guys? Or do you think it's somewhere probably in between, maybe some short-term pain but long-term gain in not signing a guy who might be on the wrong side of his career to a 5 or a 6 year deal?
No, absolutely not. I think they absolutely dodged a bullet not having Sean Monahan's contract, which could in 2 years not necessarily really be worthwhile. So I think from a Jets perspective, I mean, maybe you're willing to go 3 years because you want to let Brad Lambert kind of marinate. And again, to my point, to my thinking, I should say, Drew, if I'm the Jets, I say, okay, well, look, we've got Sean Monahan. We have Brad Lambert. We want Brad Lambert to be a 2C. We're not going to rush him. Sean Monahan has an injury history, so if he gets injured, you can allow Brad Lambert to come in. There's less pressure on him in that regard, and he gets a chance to play some games at the NHL level if Monahan's injured, but ultimately he'll still be with the Moose developing and being able to be the number 1C for the Manitoba Moose, which, again, you can disagree with me and say he's ready now. I don't think he's ready yet to assume the mantle of 2C. I think he's better suited to be with the Moose than he is with the Jets right now. And so from that perspective, I would say that they did dodge a bullet, though, because if you're the Winnipeg Jets, you're looking for a stopgap, but you aren't looking for a block.
Right.
And we talked about it when they acquired Brendan Dillon and Nate Schmidt, that you're blocking the Ville Heinolas and Dylan Sandbergs. Now, what they did was, we said if it's only a 1 or 2 year thing, then that's okay, because those guys can marinate a little bit longer, and then they'll get that call up, and then they'll be able to be ready to take over-ripened, if you will, the whole Detroit Red Wings philosophy, and then ready to take on that role at a full-time basis, and there's not really dipping your toe in, you're ready to go. And I think that from a development perspective, I don't mind that philosophy, and of course, selfishly, because I cover the Moose, I don't mind it either. But again, what from the perspective of Sean Monahan, you can't sign him to 5 years. It's insane, because first of all, I don't think his body's going to hold up for 5 more years. Number one, but number two, again, then you're basically saying to Brad Lambert, okay, then you're going to be a winger. Which again, I don't think he's going to care if he's at the NHL level. But you just saw Seattle develop him in junior as a center. You know that he prefers to play center, and you just spent a year developing him as a center for the Moose. Now, in theory, what you'd like to do is be able to develop him as a center for the Moose for another year or two.
I think 2 years would probably be excessive at that point in time.
Potentially, but give him at least another full year in the A,
Sure.
and then he's ready to go, and he's ready to assume the mantle. That, if you think about it, right, guys, what have we been talking about since Brian Little retired in 2019? Is that who's going to be the 2C for the Winnipeg Jets? And so if you're grooming Lambert to be that 2C, I mean, remember, Brad Lambert's young enough to be at a development camp.
Right.
And again, I'm not saying that he's not capable, but I think that people are rushing to get him into that spot and trying to get him into an area that, again, I just think, and all I can speak to is the experience of having watched him play. I think he just needs 1 more year in the A to kind of really take on that next level. And especially, like I said, 2C, it's not playing on the wing.
It's definitely not playing on the wing. There's more intricacies to it, especially at the NHL level. Yeah, and I totally understand your perspective. I don't necessarily disagree with it, but I also don't think that the Jets are doing themselves a disservice by probably trying it out. And I think they're going to find a way to ease him in. Let's assume that Lambert, is a member of the Winnipeg Jets to start the season. There's no guarantee on that. I mean, look, this team, it looks very similar to how it did at the start of last year. I mean, really, your biggest question would be, the only player that was on this team at the start of last year that isn't there now is really Brendan Dillon. I mean, Lauren Persois too, but and he was great, but he's the backup goaltender. But I mean, if you look at it, it's a very similar team to what the team was last year, which is why I don't know if you follow Jay Fresh Hockey on Twitter, but I do, and he put out his first sort of model for next year, and it spoke very highly about the Winnipeg Jets, like it did last year. When he put out his model, he said the model, reflects.
He had the Jets at 110, did he?
I think something like that. I mean, again, he had them over 100 points for this coming year, and it's early, and there's still tweaks to be made and things of that nature. But the model, at least that one model, still likes the Winnipeg Jets because they're largely the same team that they were. At the start of last season. Now, maybe that's just a good regular season team. Maybe that's not a team that excels in the playoffs, but we're many months away from that, and we'll cross that bridge when we come to it as the season unfolds. But from the Jets' perspective, you still have a very similar forward group to what you had last year, where you have the same sort of question marks as to who's going to be filling each role, but it's not like there's not options. Now, you might not think those options are fantastic. You might not love the idea of Vlad Nemesnikov. His brother Max is here at development camp. It's a sort of a cool story in that way. You might not love that he's that he might be that second line center, or maybe it's go back and kick at the can with Cole Perfetti or whoever it might be. You might not necessarily love that, but that's also something that can be addressed and dealt with and looked at sort of in the course of the season.
Right.
Similar to what the Jets did last year when they went out and acquired Monahan. Now you don't want to trade your first round pick every year for rentals. That's not a recipe for success by any stretch of the imagination, but it's not dire. I don't think that by any stretch of the imagination the Winnipeg Jets are in a dire position moving forward to start the 24-25 season when it comes to their forward group. I mean, their defense, a lot more questions on the back end, and we'll get into those as the show goes on throughout the course of the broadcast here this morning from the Hockey for All Center over the next couple of hours. We'll look at the forwards, we'll look at the defense. Lot more questions there, but from the forward group perspective, I think you're fine. I think you're fine in having missed out on some of these players because I don't think that any of them were going to be an immediate, overwhelming upgrade over what the Jets might end up putting out there to start the 24-25 season.
Well, I'm just saying, like, it's funny. We always, everybody loses their mind over free agency, but do teams that win free agency, how many times do they win the Stanley Cup?
Well, I mean, they rarely do.
That's my point.
Yeah.
So, and again, obviously every GM thinks that this is a move to, elevate their team, but I just think that there's so many overpays of guys who are in the back end of their career who are entitled to, get a bit of a bump and get that term and collect it. But the problem is, like, do you want to be the one? Now, look, we talked about it when Blake Wheeler signed his deal, and you said, okay, for the first couple of years, that deal is going to look good. Ended up looking good for everything but the last two, really. Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess the last one you didn't really know because they bought him out. But the point is that you were able to at least, I think, avoid. Like I said, I saw Rob's comment about Mark Scheifele and Sean Monahan, but Mark Scheifele doesn't have the injury history that Sean Monahan has, right? And so, from my perspective, I wouldn't look at it as like something that you're concerned about in terms of health. And I just look at Sean Monahan's history, and yeah, he played 83 games this year, but I wonder if, how long that's going to last when you look at the totality of his seasons in the NHL. So, again, like I said, my feeling was you don't want to hand out the big deals now, and you just are augmenting your team. I know that people are losing their minds whenever I post that the Jets make a depth move like Hayden Fleury or Mason Shaw, and it's like, well, first of all, they need to repopulate the Moose a little bit.
Right, the Moose lost a lot of their veteran players that had been there previously, absolutely.
Little Paul Edmonds, who's going to be joining us in about 15 minutes. He's walking in.
And he's not walking. This man doesn't walk. He's sauntering.
Well, he's not listening.
I know, he's not listening at all.
Save it for, the audience is listening.
Yeah,
so
I
that's
know.
good.
But this is a big man on campus walking into the building here, let me tell you. But like I said, Paul is going to join us in about 15 minutes, so always great to catch up with him. But, to your point, you're right. You need depth players. I mean, these aren't guys who are going to be relied upon to regularly step into the Winnipeg Jets lineup. I mean, you're talking about, you go through the list of guys that the Jets have signed. Take the forwards to start. Mason Shaw, a guy they're familiar with from his time with the Minnesota Wild. I mean, he's a fourth line guy. He's an AHL guy. I mean, fine. It's nothing that's the least bit overwhelming, or nothing that's probably the least bit exciting, admittedly. But they are necessary. These are moves that you just have to make at some point in time to repopulate your lineup and move up and down. Have guys who are able to step in a pinch for a game or two. Same with Jarrett Anderson Dolan, a guy familiar, played with the Los Angeles Kings a bit. I mean, these are they're not flashy, and I know everyone's snarky about it, but it's just a requirement for every NHL team. Oh my gosh, Bailey's brought us cookies. There you go. Bailey, the intern, has brought us cookies. Bailey, say hi to everybody.
Hello.
Good morning, Bailey. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. Is this your first day at Dev Camp so far?
I was here on Thursday.
Thursday, okay, good. Did you bring cookies on Thursday as well?
No.
Then we feel extra special. That's the important part. That's good. We will definitely, you know us, we're definitely going to give these cookies a good home over the next couple of hours for sure. Well, thank you for that.
No problem.
Nice to see you as well, of course.
Nice to see you too.
There you go. It's always
Bailey,
a party here.
Bailey the intern with her mom, Amy.
Yeah, they're
And the rest
Bailey
of
and
the family.
exactly. If you're wondering why they're not in the chat, it's because they're here live at development camp
Giving us
here
cookies.
at Hockey for All Center. Timmy's eyeing those cookies pretty well. I got to tell you.
I know. Tim was right on those cookies.
He's like, oh, there's some cookies coming this way. Tim's playing the role of Ezzy, apparently, is what's happening tonight. But to your point, these are depth guys, and you have to add them to your roster, and you have to build around the fringes just so you have these guys who, in a pinch, again, you're not relying on them. If all of a sudden and they're playing top 6 minutes for your team, then things have gone certainly a little bit haywire there. Here he is. Here's Paul Edmonds sauntering over. Take your time. We're not in any rush. It was nice to see you, though, on this Saturday.
9:30.
Yes,
exactly.
No rush.
Take your time. Settle in. Relax. You're all good. We're going to keep yammering on for 15 minutes until then. Grab a hat courtesy of our friends at Seagram's. There you go. We got swag given away as well here at the Hockey for All Center. Come say hi to us over the course of the next couple of hours. But so I think from the Jets' perspective, I think they're probably in a better situation. Yeah, you're on screen. Just don't do anything crazy. But I think they're in a fine position from their forward groups. Just because they have the depth that they acquired last year, and they're going to continue to use that depth to be what should be a good regular season team, because you have Connor Hellebuyck, you have forward depth, 1 through 12 that isn't necessarily laden with superstars, but it's laden with professional NHL players top to bottom. Mm-hmm. And then the question becomes one very similar to last year, is the defense. And how does that get resolved, if it gets resolved over the course of this offseason as well? That sort of brings me to the question, sort of hovering over development camp here, about Rutger McGroarty, as I'm losing my voice for a second.
Oh boy, Paulie, that's when Drew loses his voice, that's our time to shine. That's when we get a chance to kind of take the mic back. Look, I mean, Rutger McGroarty, there could have been a possibility, a chance for him to kind of make a dent. And you're not earning a position at development camp, so I mean, it would have just been a chance to be part of the organization, part of the week, part of making that impression. But of course, he is not here and will not be here, which has been made abundantly clear.
Yeah, exactly. But you wonder, does that, that's the other shoe to drop still on this offseason, I think. That's the major one. From my perspective, I don't foresee a Nikolai Ehlers trade materializing over the course of the next number of weeks, and we'll ask Paulie about that in a couple minutes here, if he agrees or disagrees. He usually disagrees with me, which is a good place to be, is disagreeing with me, but I don't see that necessarily occurring over the next couple of weeks. So then you have that one big chip. If that gets done this offseason, does that help your defense? Is that what comes in and shores up the back end? Is that where you fill in that one sort of, what I'm going to say is a bit of a gap there that is the big question mark for this team? Because I don't think any of us really saw Colin Miller getting re-signed to a 2-year deal after his stint here, after being acquired at the trade deadline, didn't necessarily result in much playing time, didn't really result in much of an opportunity. But all of a sudden, that one came sort of a bit of a surprise, $1.5 million for the next 2 years for a guy who can play on that right side, a guy who's got a big shot, a guy who in third pairing minutes usually does pretty well. To me, as a surprise, it definitely was one, but I also think there's a lot of potential there if he gets that opportunity, and it's evident based on, I think, how the Jets line up right now, particularly on the right side, is that there is an opportunity for him to step in and have an impact on this team.
I don't think there's any question. I think that, when they bought out Nate Schmidt, they created a hole, they created an opportunity, and that's what this is all about. And so, like I said, even the acquisition of Dylan Coughlin from Carolina, which still hasn't been made official, it's not official, but, as of right now, that's the reporting from Elliot Friedman, and that it was for a conditional 7th. I've read some other things that say people are saying that there's more to it and there's more behind it, but for right now, Friedman is reporting that it was, they're picking up a conditional. It's going to be for a conditional 7th, and again, like I said, you're getting a guy who's you're hoping you're buying low on him, and that's a really minimal cost, a 7th rounder. So I mean, from a Jets perspective, you may as well take a flyer on a guy who worked with assistant coach Dean Shinwith in Carolina, so
and had some good numbers under him.
Had some good numbers under him. So that to me is a guy who is, like I said, a buy low candidate that you really aren't taking a big risk on. Mm-hmm. And if he turns into, like, he's 6'2", he's a right shot. If you can turn him into something, that's a huge benefit to your organization, and again, at a low cost.
He's put up big numbers at the AHL level, never really been able to translate that to the NHL level. Paulie, are you ready to jump on? I know it's not 9:30. Do you want to join us? I see you're sitting here, you're pecking away at the phone. I don't want to make this any more awkward than it already might be.
Of course, I I don't mind putting in some bonus time.
Okay, good.
I've never been a clock watcher in my life, Drew.
I appreciate. You know what? I remember the radio guys used to say that too. You're always missing your 10 posts. You got to get out at 2 minutes before the top of the hour. Not very good with the clock, on the programming.
Boy, if Raccoon Carney was listening right now.
You're absolutely right about that. Hey, good morning, sir. Nice to see you
thanks,
here.
Guys.
Always a pleasure to have you on with us. We're here at Dev Camp. I mean, at Hope Springs Internal, definitely this week. All these young players getting their first sort of taste of, maybe not necessarily professional hockey, but right on the cusp of it. Whereas these are the guys. This is where you start if you want to make your way into being a professional hockey player. So you see a lot of that, and a lot of the excitement, and the I say the genuine nature of these young players as they begin their stepping stones to their career this week.
I've really enjoyed the week, and I think part of it is they've kind of shortened down the on-ice sessions. Not that we don't want to watch hockey, but it's been efficient. Let's just say that. They're out, they're doing some drills. They're doing more than just one-on-one stuff. The drills are then combining 2-on-1s and then 3 guys into a drill and low to high, those types of things. I kind of watch a lot of that. And then they have a little short scrimmage. And then they're done. And then we have the media availability. And the media availability has been excellent this year. We've been able to come into the room and just kind of sit down with these kids in an environment that's a little bit less, stressful for them than just all these microphones in front of their face. You can sit at their stall. I always find that when you sit down with somebody one-on-one, you just get more from them. It's a conversation.
Sort of old school.
Yes.
What used to happen in dressing rooms before everything was so formalized, I would argue.
I totally agree. And it takes that stress and that barrier away. And these young guys are able then to talk. And I've kind of centered my focus this week on the young Manitobans. I talked to Luke Misselbacher. I talked yesterday to Gavin Hodnett. I'm going to talk to Nathan Brown today, who I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, is the only junior A player at this camp from Niverville and the MJHL. So you get the stories about these guys, and it came from Luke Misselbacher, who told me, quote unquote, I grew up in this rink and now I'm skating here. Gavin Hodnett yesterday from the Edmonton Oil Kings. He and his dad had been at every one of these D camps to watch as fans, and now people are watching him. Right. Like, it's come full circle for him. He told me a great story yesterday that when he was a younger guy, and he's only 18 years old, but when he was a younger guy and he was coming, he came with some buddies and his brother and his dad, and they didn't have any paper to get autographs signed on, so they actually had the players signing the kids' arms. So, I mean, all of these great stories about all of these things from these kids and the excitement level that they've had. And I think that the organization has done a really good job, and they've communicated this as well. And Jimmy Roy was on Thursday from media availability from the organizational standpoint. And he talked about shortening this down, making sure that there was a lot of focus on eating right, getting to know all these other prospects, formulating relationships, getting to know everybody in the organization. It's kind of the first contact, right? In a lot of respects. The other thing that I've seen too is you can really notice who are the high round draft picks when they're on the ice. Not that there's a varying huge degree of talent, because there isn't. They might shoot the puck with more velocity. It might be slightly more accurate. But for me, it's the skating ability of your top prospects that are out here. And it becomes noticeable in drills, and just the poise and the presence that they have. Like in baseball, they talk about that mound presence that a pitcher has. You can see that presence with some of those guys. Salamonson yesterday, because that was his first skate that he had. Barlow, Lambert. Yeah. I mean, there's just a different kind of guy. And I know I've gone on and I've kind of taken this answer out for dinner here, but and a movie, quite frankly.
We call that the weeb. Yeah, that's the weeb.
But I mean, think about what this is doing for a guy like Luke Misselbacher. I come back to him. He's playing with Brad Lambert and Colby Barlow on the same line. I mean, and actually he's done fairly well. I've been watching that line, and Dave and I were standing together. I mean, they had a presence inside the offensive zone yesterday. So there's just all kinds of great stories and feel-good stories and get to know you, and I've kind of immersed myself in it, and it's been a great week so far, guys.
Paul, it's funny. It's a little cliche, but you do see how important this week is, especially with COVID when it was gone and it was kind of written off and they weren't doing it for a couple of years. And then you see I think it's twofold. It's important for these guys to be able to make a connection to this community, and it's also really important for this community to make a connection to these guys, because it's been full. I mean, you've been here, I've been here Thursday, Friday. It was full. People were here. People were watching. I just look at it, that community aspect of kind of reintegration, because I really think that was lost during COVID. And now, because these guys are getting to see the fervor of the fan base and they get to experience that, it's just been such a elevation. And you see, like a guy like Barlow, how he's embracing being in Winnipeg, and also to the extent of having those guys play for the Moose at the end of the season. Connor Levis did the same. They get a little taste. They understand what it's like to play as a pro. And just, I don't know, just to me, it just seems like it's back to normal almost. And I know it seems obvious, but for a while it wasn't. And now you're seeing that kind of reintegration, both for the community, but also for the players.
Totally, and I'm glad that we're well past those days,
Yes,
of course. But I think that what it does is it lets the players, the athlete, understand the importance of this hockey team to the community. And you know, you talked about great crowds on Thursday and Friday. Well, now we've got the weekend here, and if you were at the Bomber game and then head out off to Lake, you won't be available here today. But I would imagine the crowds will grow today and tomorrow. Wow. You know, for sure.
Look how many people are already here.
I know.
They're not on the ice for another 30 minutes. There's
Right.
10 or 10:30, and there's already tons of people who are ready and eager to see what they're going to see.
Yeah, and so I wonder if they kind of have a longer scrimmage today, or if they do something a little bit longer to kind of feed the appetite of the fans. But as somebody once said to me, and it's so true, I mean, Jets fans cannot get enough Jets information. And there's all kinds of information out here today to see, right?
We built a brand on that philosophy.
And we, for sure. And you've done quite well as well. By the way, do you have my PO number?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I sent it to accounting, unfortunately.
Though the part of this is that everybody likes to think that they have a higher, educational level when it comes to hockey in our market than the average guy. So they can come here and try to prove that by watching certain players and then feeling like if they have any commentary on it, that it comes from a good place, right? That they've done some homework on this. So that's what it's kind of all about as well. But I've really enjoyed the week, and the players get to see how important the hockey team is to the community, and really how important it is to have the young blood coming up through the organization. And boy, the other part that was interesting was you could sense, Dave, when we were standing here on Thursday, the nervousness on the ice with the young guys. I didn't see that as much yesterday. It started to dissipate, and there's not a comfort level that would tell you that you're at a country club, but more of a comfort level with all of these guys, with their surroundings and the environment that they're in.
Well, they're back to if hockey is familiar to them
Right.
after you get over those sort of early jitters and that sort of thing. Let's move it towards and this is obviously hope springs eternal, and a lot of optimism with Dev Camp and, of course, everything else. But everyone's focus is, of course, now on 24-25, the upcoming season. The schedule released earlier this week, free agency earlier this week. I guess, what are your what were your impressions of what the Jets did or maybe didn't do come free agency, and how that translates into next season's team? Dave and I were talking off air. We had you on maybe it was a month ago or 6 weeks ago, and you were the first one, I think, that mentioned on the program about the optimism that you thought Brad Lambert was going to be a fixture on the Jets next season. And so ever since then, it's almost become generally accepted that he's going to have every opportunity to have a role on the Winnipeg Jets next year. So I just sort of in general, maybe the last weeks, months, about how this team is going to translate into next year. Very similar forward group, but the defense is obviously still a bit in flux, and the goaltending is now solidified with the signings of Comrie and Kakkonen.
So this is not a veiled shot by any stretch, but Brad Lambert has done it properly. He came in, and then he was asked to go and play in Seattle, and he did. And then he was asked to play for the Moose, and he did. And then he was asked to play in Game 82, and he did. And all through that, you could see the improvement that he was making in the North American game. And I think he's ready. I think he's ready for a shot at probably not center. I would say that they probably want to get him onto the wing first and foremost. He skates wonderfully and he's fast, and he's become a bigger body. Like, I think they only have him listed at 6 feet. I got him at about 6'1", maybe 6'2". He's grown a little since he was first drafted by the Jets from that standpoint. But I see him integrating into a top 9 role for sure. Maybe top 6. It depends on who they move in, who they move out, how they kind of circulate and have the line combinations. I don't think there's going to be a lot of fluctuation that way between Rick Bowness and now Scott Arniel and his new staff. But from that standpoint, I see Brad Lambert being an NHLer this year out of the gate. And that's good because, as Kevin Cheveldayoff said, at the end of the draft, there's now opportunities for young players to move in. And if you don't seize those opportunities or if you don't view them, then you're kind of missing the boat here. I think Brad sees that chance. He was kind of guarded in his discussion with the media the other day, and he did acknowledge the fact that there is an opportunity here, but whatever it is will come to him as it comes. So we're not slotting him in as the second line center, or we're putting him in on that first line power play. But Brad Lambert will be an impact player on this team at some point, but he needs the starting point, and I do believe the starting point for him as a full-time NHLer will be this season come September, October.
Paul, it's interesting because there's a narrative out there that the Jets draft, develop, and destroy. And quite frankly, I don't understand it. We had 11 Jets prospects.
That might be one man's opinion.
Yeah, sure. But I'm just saying, like, you see that a little bit. And to me, it's confusing because, again, 11 draft picks played on the Moose last year. Thomas Milic, 2023 fifth rounder, was the starting goaltender. Now, he wasn't the starting to the point you just made. He wasn't the starter. And we talked to him yesterday. He thought the plan was going to be for him to be in the ECHL all of last year, maybe with a call up here or there. He was on an AHL deal, not an NHL deal, got his ELC in May. But the point is that there is opportunity for these guys if you can seize it. And they're not going to give it to you. You have to seize it. But the other idea that they don't want to let these guys develop. I mean, look at the center depth for the Moose last year. Chaz Lucius, Danny Zhilkin, Brad Lambert. You don't win a lot of hockey games. You've been around this game a long time. You don't win a lot of hockey games with very young center depth like that. But the Jets were prepared to allow their team to experience some bumps because they wanted to let those guys develop.
So let me interrupt and throw this question back to you then.
Sure.
How did you see the Moose season play out with the young centermen? They got better as the year went along. Like, the Moose were dead and buried out of the playoffs, and then all of a sudden the second half hit, and they make the playoffs and tried to make some noise. Well, I'm going to tell you it's because those young guys got their feet wet, got comfortable, and started to perform. That's the best thing that can happen for an organization, and we saw that in real time last year at the AHL level with the top farm affiliate of the Winnipeg Jets playing right in their own backyard.
Yeah. No, and that, to me, like I said, like, there is going to be an opportunity. I guess what I'm getting at ultimately is that nothing is handed to anybody. You have to scratch and claw your way, whether it's us in media trying to make a dent or make an impression, or guys on the ice. You have to earn it. And I think that you see it with these guys. Like I said, a guy like Thomas Milic, he was ready to go, went down, played in the Spengler Cup, which he was raving about, the opportunity to go to Switzerland and get that opportunity. But also, like I said, when the Moose goaltending wasn't to the level it needed to be, suddenly you've got a guy, WHL goalie of the year, but still a young guy. He steps in and he doesn't miss a beat, and he gives them an opportunity and makes them, a big part of that reason why they drove towards the playoffs. I'm just saying, like, there are opportunities, to the point you made about Brad Lambert. And speaking of, there's one of those young centers, Chaz Lucius, who's skating around behind us now in a yellow non-contact. His ankle is still recovering from the surgery he had that ended his season. But I just think that there are opportunities, and I think that they're affording them to these young guys. It's just not going to be at the NHL level, because the NHL isn't a development league. Now, again, Brad Lambert, we're going to see what he's going to do in training camp. But I just think that there are opportunities for these young prospects to get to develop.
I told this story numerous times, and I'll tell it again, and it goes back to Ben Sherrod. And when he was drafted by Atlanta, and then to become the Winnipeg Jets, he looked at the depth chart, and he said, I'm like 18th. I'm never going to play in the National Hockey League. That was his first thought. And I'm not being flippant here. He said, I think I'm 18th on the depth chart. I'm never going to play there. Well, I mean, he's not only played in the National Hockey League, played for the Jets, played for Montreal, and been around a little bit, Detroit. and signed some contracts, made some pretty good money, and had a pretty good career. So, the opportunity is there. You have to work for it. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of time.
Well, and you got to steal reps where you can steal them.
For sure.
I mean, that's which is sort of more football terminology, but if you can steal reps and you can stand out and you just put your head down and do the job and do the work, eventually you're going to get noticed at the very least. And if you continue to be able to build upon that, you can turn into something.
The Thomas Milic story is fascinating to me too, because this guy was passed over for a couple of years in the draft, and then I talked to him yesterday, and he said that one of the things that he thinks helped him become a Winnipeg Jet and get drafted was the fact that, or signed, was the fact that he played for Seattle against Winnipeg in the ice in that playoff series. Now, the Jets had already been in contact with him throughout that season, but he came in and played 2 really good games at Canada Life Center, and I was at both. And that just, I think, put him onto another level, that in a big moment, in the Western Hockey League final, this guy was the best of the 2 goaltenders at that point. And then he goes down and didn't take the demotion to the East Coast Hockey League after he gets into the organization. He didn't take the demotion. He goes down to Norfolk, where he said, by the way, he loved the beach.
Yeah, Virginia.
Yeah, Virginia Beach. And he plays there, and you got to understand that even though that you're sent down to the East Coast Hockey League, and it might be referred to as AA hockey, people are still watching, and they're watching how you perform. And the coach that is coaching you there is always in contact with Craig Heisinger, Kevin Cheveldayoff, Larry Simmons. How's he doing? What's going on? Oh, he's playing really well. He's acting like a pro. And then you get the recall to the Moose, and next thing you know, you're backstopping the Moose in the playoff games at the most important time of the year. So yes, there is, all to kind of encapsulate this, there is opportunity. There's always opportunity. Because of the salary cap, and this has been mentioned by the Jets organization, you need those lower paid players to feed in, because there's really no bourgeoisie here. There's no upper middle class. There's the haves and kind of the have-nots, and that's the way the salary cap structure is in today's National Hockey League. And if there wasn't a salary cap, we wouldn't be having a team. I could tell you that right now in this market, and in a few others in Canada as well. But there is opportunity. You just have to play, seize the opportunity, make the best of it, steal reps, make an impression, do something that puts you ahead of somebody else. What's that old book about resume writing? What color is your balloon, right? You've got to stand out, right? You have to stand out amongst others, and whatever it is you do it well so that you can get that opportunity. And once you get it, you need to seize it and try to elevate your game even more.
Paul Edmonds is our guest Saturday morning. This is the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on location at the Hockey for All Center, Portage West, if you will, the Jets development camp. The Chaz Lucius on the ice, and other players going to be filtering on as well. Lots of people milling about as they're getting ready to watch the next wave of the Jets players. Looking at, again, the roster for next year, the goaltending one, I think it was a foregone conclusion that Laurent Brossoit wasn't going to be back. He has earned himself a big contract, or more money than the Jets were willing to consider to give him, for good reason, of course, and he's off to Chicago. And they bring in Eric Comrie, an old friend, of course, and they bring in Kaapo Kähkönen, a guy who's bounced around a little bit over the last number of years. What do you think about the backup goaltending situation for the Jets? You got 2 guys who are, really, one of them is going to be the Connor Hellebuyck backup. The other one is going to be with Thomas Milic with the Manitoba Moose.
Yeah, not a bad spot for either one of them.
Similar to what they did last year with Brossoit and Colin Delia, of course.
I think that you knew that Brossoit was going to be the anointed backup. In this particular case with Kähkönen and with Comrie.
There's Kelly Moore, CJOB joining us, or walking in here now.
Oh, look at the entourage he's got too, eh? There's like 14 black vehicles with tinted windows outside. It's bigger than the Prime Minister. I don't know that either one, Kähkönen or Comrie, is anointed the backup goaltender.
Right.
There's going to be a competition for that, which makes this more intriguing. Not just in camp when it starts, but how they divvy up the minutes in the preseason games. And that will probably make a determination on who is going to get that job. Either way, it's not a bad spot, and I've said this for a long time. The Comries come here, and they've got a young family, and they know they're going to be in one of two spots, but they're going to be in the same city. So there's an attraction to signing some players. We hear all of the negativity, and sometimes our market is rife with negativity when it comes to our city and how we are perceived and how we perceive our own city. Well, there are benefits that outweigh some of the other opportunities that somebody might sign. You know where you're going to be. Dominic Toninato has always talked about that as well. He knows that he's kind of that fringe guy. He knows he's going to be up for a few games with the National Hockey League, but probably down with the Moose. But they're not moving. They're not bouncing around mid-season because of a call-up, a recall, whatever it is, a demotion. They know where they're going to be. So the Comries understand that. It's an easy fit. I think the relationship between Wade Flaherty, the goaltending coach, and Eric Comrie goes back a long way. You know what you're getting. And I like the competition that they're going to create for that backup job to Connor Hellebuck, and then to see who is going to be with Thomas Milic at the American Hockey League level.
Paul, one of the things that we talk about opportunity, not just for the young players, but also for guys like Dylan Sandberg. A guy like Dylan Sandberg, what an opportunity this summer is going to be. He signed his 2-year deal, I think about a year ago. It was a year ago yesterday, and this is a big year for him. Obviously now a contract year, but also because Brendan Dillon is not here. How significant do you think that is for him to get that jump and to have, what an expectation, but also what an opportunity for him this season to kind of really solidify himself as a top 4 D-man?
I think he's earned it. I think the way he's played, he has now been knocking at the door to have that opportunity. He's going to get it. And I don't think that one thing we know about Dylan is he's uber competitive. He has the size, the skating ability, the puck mobility as well. I think that playing with Nate Schmidt and some others along the line and understanding how to be a pro, he's ready for this opportunity. The other guy that for me is going to be interesting, and of course he needs a new contract, and that's Logan Stanley. And now he's 26 years old. And so is this the last contract? Is it one more year and then he's going to become an unrestricted free agent? What's going to happen with him? And the reason I bring him up is he hasn't played a lot of hockey the last 2 years. Now, 2 years ago was because of injury, and he had a hard time getting in the lineup because he had 2 injuries. Last year, there was a lot of healthy scratches. There is an opportunity for him to push in now from the 7th or 8th defense spot into maybe that 6th spot role. And the other thing that he does, and we talk about doing something that nobody else has, having a tool in the toolbox that nobody else plays with, he has some toughness to his game. And with Brendan Dillon gone, who's going to replace that toughness on the blue line? Because you just can't have Adam Lowry doing all of that. You need to have a complement on the back end. And I think if Logan Stanley is looking and understanding where he needs to be different than others, it's getting back on retrieves, moving the puck efficiently, holding the line, but also playing with that edge at 6'7". So there's an opportunity for him in that area because Brendan Dillon isn't here anymore to provide that. And the Jets need some of that on the back end, and they understand that. So one way or another, Logan Stanley is going to have another contract. The length of it and for how much, we don't know. But at some point, because he does have arbitration rights, at some point he'll be a Winnipeg Jet, and then the opportunity, the floor is his to see if he runs with that opportunity this year in a role that I'm kind of describing here.
Well, what does that mean for Ville Heinola then?
I think there's an opportunity for him as well. We have to see Ville and what he can do now. He's marinated in the American Hockey League for a couple of years.
He made this team out of training camp before the injury.
Right, absolutely, he did. And Nate Schmidt was probably going to be the guy that was the odd man out. And just the way it goes, one tweak of a leg and Nate Schmidt's up here all year, right? So from that standpoint, I think Ville's got to push in. So again, competition for jobs. But if you're looking for something a little bit different, Logan Stanley provides that. If you're looking for another puck mover, that's where Ville Heinola can come in here. So I think, there's another contract that's up after next year, and that's Neil Pionk's contract. So let's not look ahead. You have to look ahead because these projections, gentlemen, that we're making are all the projections that go on in the front office or the boardroom, right? Okay, what's happening here? It's a chess game. What's happening 3 or 4 moves ahead, 3 or 4 years ahead, 2 or 3 years ahead? And I think that, Ville Heinola has got a real good opportunity to make this team again, and I think a lot of people would like to see it. So there is opportunity, getting back to what Dave said, for young players to integrate into the lineup, no question about it.
Paul, one of the things you just mentioned is how we kind of take this market for granted. And I thought it's going back a little ways, but I think Dylan DeMello's words were really poignant in that regard, talking about community first. I thought, to me, so many guys miss the boat, sometimes even players, when they're talking about it in terms of connecting with the fans, because they'll say, well, I love the teammates. We get that you love your teammates. But Dylan DeMello started his response talking about how much he loved the community and connected to the community. And I think that so many, it was my dad's birthday yesterday, shout out to my dad, but the point is that there were some folks from Ottawa, and they were talking about the Winnipeg market and some of the comments toward, the feelings towards it. And I said, well, look, listen, Dylan DeMello said it, you pop in here for 24 hours, 48 hours, you drive downtown, you don't see anything, you don't experience the restaurants, you don't experience the culture of the city, all the things to do. We know you like to ice fish and hunt and all that stuff, as do I. Well, not the hunting, but everything else. The point is, there's lots to do in Manitoba.
Depends on what you're hunting.
Yeah, that's true, Paulie. That's true. Fair enough.
If you could get Minuk to do the show from a tree stand, that would be great.
Hey, we were going to do it from an ice shack. I still want to do that with Paulie, maybe in
That would be fun, actually. Yeah.
I know. Remember, we were going to do it and have it. You drive over on the machine. So, anyways, but the point, I guess, what I'm getting to is that I think having Dylan DeMello sign that contract and kind of dispel that notion that that people don't want to be here. And I mean, again, he was a UFA. The Jets took a huge risk, right? Similar when they left him exposed, and Seattle could have drafted him or selected him in the expansion draft. But my point I'm making is he's a guy who had a lot of options. Could have probably made some more money, maybe. But regardless, he's a guy who chose Winnipeg, and I think that sends a big message. And I just thought again, it's that idea of connecting to the community that we sometimes lose focus on. We almost take, not you specifically, but we take it in a negative way, and I think that there's a lot of people that helps to dispel that notion.
That sentiment has overlapped over 1.0 to 2.0, because I remember hearing stories from people like Craig Heisinger about guys getting traded to Winnipeg, and oh boy, and their wife is oh boy, and then they got here and loved it, right? And I think a lot of that has kind of come over and translated to 2.0. Brendan Dillon, I think wanted to stay here. The unfortunate part was they had to, as they kind of went along toward free agency or getting close toward it, he said, okay, I think Brendan was ready to re-sign here.
Right.
But as they got further to unrestricted free agent, he said, let's test the market. I could always circle back. Dylan DeMello wanted to stay here, comfortable with his family, owned a home here. And so from that standpoint, I think that what you're growing is the ability to have these guys be your best sales force when it comes to selling the city and the organization. And there's been a commitment here from a lot of guys over a lot of years. I go back to Blake Wheeler. Blake Wheeler committed to this city numerous times. Adam Lowry has, Josh Morrissey has, the list goes on, Connor Hellebuck, Mark Scheifele. So there's been a commitment to this city, and other guys see that and they want to be part of it. So the best sales force that you have for your city and for your organization is the players themselves. And that endorsement from Dylan DeMello, I think, resonated right not only through our city, but right through the hockey market to understand a little bit more about the impact that Winnipeg can have on your career and certainly on your home life while you're enjoying your career on the ice.
Well, look, culture and the success of a franchise and everything else is a huge determining factor in attractiveness to free agency and attractiveness to players. I mean, the Edmonton Oilers and Edmonton and Winnipeg as cities, there's a lot of parallels. They're cold northern climates. The Edmonton Oilers, largely lately, are really able to get a lot of free agents, even at a bargain price, because they want to play with Connor McDavid.
For sure.
You look at Adam Henrique signs for $3 million a year. Jeff Skinner goes and signs there as soon as he's bought out by Buffalo. I mean, that, success on the ice and building a franchise and building that culture, players will go wherever they'll go to that, even if it's in a cold climate. It's not a it's not a complete and total drawback. You hear, oh, the tax base and this and that, and everybody makes a big deal of that. And sure, that's a function. But I promise you that if the Florida Panthers were a tire fire like they've been a decade ago, in their franchise, now that they've got some stable ownership, or the Tampa Bay Lightning back when they had just that disastrous ownership group, just because it's Florida and doesn't have an income tax or whatever, players that had options weren't going there because they knew what, a disaster of an organization. Nobody wants to play for the disastrous organization.
I'll take it a step further, and if you were signing in those locations when those teams weren't very good, you were signing because you were wanting to get into the weather and wear your flip-flops to practice in January, and it really wasn't about winning for you. I mean, people in Edmonton are signing in Edmonton because they feel that they have a chance to win, and that's what you want to create. Winning breeds winning, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that there will become a day when some of the free agents that you might want are looking as a destination to maybe come here. Now, back to, and we kind of hinted on it, but back to draft day or free agency frenzy day. Listen, I know for a fact, and he came out and was quite honest, and sometimes he's a little guarded and not as effusive with the information, but GM Kevin Cheveldayoff said that they took some swings at guys, but they also backed away. I mean, I was okay with, let's take Sean Monahan for a minute. Yeah, he makes the Winnipeg Jets better had he stayed here as a second-line center and on the power play. I was okay with the $5.5 million. I really was. But the term was a little steep for me at 5 years. Sure. This is a guy that's 30 years old. He's had 8 surgeries over his career. Not 1, not 2, 8. I mean, the durability factor for me really kind of swings toward no when it comes to signing him for 5 years. So on that kind of deal, you've got to walk away. If you're competing for Adam Henrique, and it's Winnipeg versus Edmonton, Adam Henrique is going, well, wait a minute. Edmonton got to the Stanley Cup final. I maybe have a better chance to kind of win there over Winnipeg. So you get beat out by that, right? So you're always constantly improving yourself and your organization. But I don't think that Winnipeg wasn't involved and weren't aggressive in trying to bolster their team in the free agent market. It's just one of those years. And the other thing that is interesting is when you look at, and Chevy said this, the injection of the additional $4.5 million into the salary cap was a huge push into one of the increases that teams haven't had for quite a while, I mean, pre-COVID, right? Sure. And teams like Seattle, who all of a sudden became a player in the free agency market, Utah, formerly Arizona, who never dabbled, they were taking your contracts and draft picks just to get above the floor, right? And then also in your own division, Nashville, they've never been a big swinger when it comes to really the free agent market. And they went out. So you had all this competition, this added competition made it a little bit more difficult for, say, a smaller market team to come in and say, we're going to make that commitment to you, not just financially, but in terms of term. And it might be, we might look back in a couple of years and go, boy, the Jets are thankful they didn't sign this guy to that or that guy to this.
Well, that's what a lot of the pun, there's the people who are, ripping their hair out and saying the Jets didn't do anything. And then there's also some of the commentariat, and rightfully so, are saying, look, the Jets actually dodged a bullet by not succeeding in getting any of these deals done because they're going to age poorly or they're not going to necessarily, provide the upgrades that are necessary. And Dave and I were talking about this earlier at the beginning of the show. This team, the forward group in particular, is basically the same as it was last year. And if you have a hole that needs to get addressed, you can do it again at the trade deadline. You can do it again, later in the year if you look like you're going to be a quality team who needs some improvements on the margins and things of that nature. You don't have to go out and, spend for 5, 6, 7 years and hamstring yourself, for future. You can just do things in season, like the Jets did last year. Now, you want to obviously do more or not lose in 5 games in the first round every year, but there's still ability to improve mid-season. You don't have to win the offseason. You can win during middle of the season too.
Totally agree. And what's the next sort of mark on the calendar here? And the Jets were very pragmatic about this and still are. Look at Washington. They're at $104 million, I believe, on the salary cap. $104 million.
Right.
they're going to have to shave at some point.
Right.
So they have to divest. Is that divestment through a trade?
Sure.
Or is that divestment through the waiver wire? I mean, at some point, there's going to be some players, and Washington's not the only team. There's a few of them.
You can pick some bones.
You can pick some bones.
Yeah.
And it's not just that there's not meat on these bones either. There's probably going to be some good players that are going to have to be exposed, or that these organizations are going to have to part with, whether they liked it or not.
Right.
So I still believe, even though that they're not necessarily free agents, there's still good players that will be available that are just on somebody's roster right now.
Well, sorry, Dave, go ahead.
No, Paul, I just wanted to ask you about, the comments from Connor Hellebuck when he won the Vezina. He talked about the continuity of Scott Arniel and the coaching staff. And I thought those were interesting remarks from the Jets' top netminder. Just that idea of, we've got everything in place. We just want to keep doing what we're doing. Obviously, they need to translate from being a very good regular season team to a very good playoff team. But I thought it was interesting comments. Now, of course, you could say, well, what else is he going to say? But he didn't have to say anything. Like sometimes you don't need to say anything. But I thought it was kind of like his approval, I guess, if you will, of the move to keep that continuity, to keep Scott Arniel, to kind of have that framework, but also with his new additions, to maybe work on those areas that were problematic for them, which, as we all know, were their special teams.
That endorsement probably came from exit interviews. And I know that the Jets went through the process of hiring Scott Arniel as their next head coach. I think he was always the front runner, but they had to look around and they had to talk to some other people as they did. But they also want to get a lay of the land and the feeling from the room on Scott. And it came back, I can tell you, almost unanimously in favor of Scott being the heir apparent to Rick Bowness. The other part of this is, and this goes to what Connor was saying and you as the conduit for Connor Hellebuck, and when it came to Rick and his strategies, Scott Arniel's fingerprints were all over this thing for the last couple of years, right?
Right.
Schemes, schematics, the way they were running things, how they wanted to do things, culture, all of those things. They collaborated very well together. And Scott was a big part of that. So this is a seamless transition to kind of keeping things the same. It goes back to a couple years ago when Rick Bowness took over this team. And that training camp was different. And you heard from the players how they had to get ready and understand different systems. Last year was, again, seamless. It just was a continuation of the end of the season after Vegas into the new season, because they didn't have to learn all of the new drills and the ways they wanted to play in their defensive zone coverage, how they wanted to attack, how they wanted to play in the offensive zone on a two-man forecheck. Same thing happens here. There's the system, the foundation of it, and now there's just going to be some tweaking. And so anybody that's been here for a while understands that. They don't have to get to know a new playbook, so to speak, to steal another football sort of phrase.
Yeah.
And then those players with the new guys coming in help integrate the new guys quickly, because they understand what's going on. And when you have somebody on the bench or standing in line for a drill helping you explain what's going on and what the whole message and the desire of the drill is, or what we're trying to do, that goes easier. So I think the endorsement from Connor Hellebuck was very well received and appropriate from the standpoint that I don't think that there was anybody else for this job here other than Scott Arniel.
Well, let's go on this last one. So the unsaid part of this development camp is the absence of Rutger McGroarty. Do you think that he, has misplayed his hand in taking the hard line that he has taken because Kevin Cheveldayoff himself earlier this week said there's opportunities for young players in this team, and now it seems like he's maybe painted himself into a bit of a corner and is sort of stuck there until or unless something happens. So how do you think that the Jets organization has handled that, and how do you think it from the player's perspective that he maybe was taking the bad advice or advice from the wrong person?
A lot of things orbiting in that question, and it's a good question. From the Jets' standpoint, they've handled it with aplomb. I don't know how else you could handle it other than if you wanted to get into a war publicly on the he said, right? Mm-hmm. And
wait, Kevin He?
That's good, Dave. Yeah. But even Jimmy Roy this week was saying positive things.
Great, he had a great relationship with Rutger. Here's where it is. The Jets would like to have Rutger here. The Jets would like to have Rutger at camp. The Jets would love to have Rutger sign a contract. I don't know that that's happening, and it's probably not going to. So now you're dealing with trying to move that asset.
Right.
From Rutger's standpoint, I have a bit of a problem, and we don't know the whole story, but I can only presume, because these kinds of conversations go on in my home, and I'm sure as your kids get older, they will as well. You need to work for what you get.
Oh, absolutely.
And this handing things over and opportunities over doesn't fly. And I know that this is a different breed of National Hockey League player or potential National Hockey League player, but still, when you look at young opportunities, and I'll circle back to the Stanley Cup final, how many young guys were on Florida? How many young guys were on the Edmonton Oilers? Evan Bouchard comes into mind, but he played 3 years on the blue line already for the Edmonton Oilers, and he had a great playoff.
Yeah.
These are teams that get the furthest to become veteran teams. There's a reason why it filters out that way. Right. Rutger McGroarty was going to get an opportunity here, but he just probably didn't like the opportunity that he was going to get, which is, hey, you need to go down here like other guys have gone down here. You need to sign. Where he has the advantage right now, and I don't know that he's holding a gun to the Winnipeg Jets' head. I don't feel that way right now. Is he still has one more year of college before I think he could become an unrestricted free agent.
Well, this the 24, 25, and 25, 26.
Right. So there's a couple more years before this.
Right.
So he still has college eligibility to kind of kick the can down the road, to do things or do something similar that Jimmy Hayes did or Jimmy Vesey did,
Blake
Wheeler did. Mike Riley did.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a list of these guys.
Adam
Fox. There's a list of these guys that have walked this thing to free agency and then signed with whatever team they want. So there's still some time. I guess there's time both on the Jets side and also for Rutger McGroarty. I don't feel that there's a pressure on the Jets to move that asset next week.
24 months is a long time to put off getting paid as a professional hockey player. I mean, that's what he's talking about doing if both sides dig in and if it gets to that point.
And that's the position that he's put himself in.
That's what I'm saying.
Right? And so I would imagine that in conversations with his representatives, they've talked about those things, right? But I think what they're kind of gambling on is that this will happen sooner or later. That would be facilitating a move to another organization sooner than later.
Right.
But, Rutger also, if it doesn't happen this year and he goes back to Michigan, he better have a good year.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's a lot of eyes that will be watching, interested eyes, to see if they want to, acquire that asset from the Winnipeg Jets. And if he doesn't have a good year and there is a regression, then the market gets a lot smaller. So there's a lot of gambling that's going on here, particularly from the player, not necessarily from the organization.
Big summer plans?
We have redone our deck.
Oh, good.
So
you can
and the cookie, thank you.
You can enjoy sitting on it.
Yes, I actually watched the second half of the football game last night on said deck.
That's nice. That's a nice way to watch.
I'll do a little fishing. My younger guy's still playing ball and enjoying that. And just some, and kind of time just to kind of kick back and cut grass and have the odd beer and enjoy.
I'm sure the odd one.
The odd one, yes.
Yeah. When he says the odd one, he means he's only going to have odd numbers of beer each day. 1, 3,
like
5.
13.
Yeah.
11. Sorry.
Come on. Moderation. Paul Edmonds, voice of the Winnipeg Jets, good friend of ours. It's always great to catch up.
Thanks a lot, guys. Anytime. I'll see you
you
guys, I guess, at FanFest. I have an annual. Is that standing invitation, right?
Standing invitation.
Okay, yeah.
Anytime we're broadcasting live from here, you can join us.
All right.
There you go. Paul Edmonds joining us. That's we're over an hour commercial free. So why don't we pay some bills, take some ads, much more to come. We're live at the Hockey for All Center, Winnipeg Jets development camp going on behind us. It is the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
The game can change just like that. Accidents happen when you aren't protected. So now what? Getting to your injury quickly can make all the difference. Help prevent them from being game changers with Linden Market Dental Center. Bonding, crowns, bridges, and dental implants. State-of-the-art treatments are available to help you get back in the game. To learn more, visit lindenmarketdentalcenter.com. Creating smiles for life.
It's all over, folks, and the run has come to an end.
You'll be so far away.
A Canadian team hasn't won the Cup in over 30 years.
And the Cup will stay south of the border.
Maybe it's time we try something different. This playoff season, let's cheer with the fans we've always cheered against. Team up for the Cup at Boston Pizza. We did it again!
You're on fire, man.
There's power in a handshake after a great game or great deal. It shows professionalism and respect. Two qualities Zappia Group Realty take pride in. You don't build a business where 95% of your clients are referred by others without honesty, integrity, and total dedication to client satisfaction. To sell your home for more in less time, shake hands with Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Get started at ZappiaGroup.com.
We're back, the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, Saturday morning, live from the Hockey for All Center, Portage West. The Jets prospects are on the ice right behind us. Lots of people milling about, watching the next wave, or what will hopefully be for a lot of these players, the next wave of Winnipeg Jets talent to eventually make this team. Big thanks to Paul Edmonds for joining us earlier. There was a great chat. I love always catching up with Paul. I mean, we've known Paul for so long. That's always great. Just a nice free-flowing conversation wherever the chat may go. It's always great to catch up with him. I think Murat Atesh is going to join us at the bottom of the hour. So much more to come as we're live here, as people are filtering in, watching some of these young players. It's sort of, you know, it's a bit of a bookend. There, oh my gosh, Jamie Thomas. You're supposed to be studying for the fantasy football draft. Jamie Thomas, Jets media personality, coming into the room as well here. I'm saying it's sort of a full circle season. You know, we started the year, the Fan Fest was back in September, we were here. Yeah. And then it's nice that we're here for development camp. And next week is the season finale. We're going to be off after next week. So we're doing the show next Saturday. Then we're going to be off until Banjo Bowl Saturday. We always take that sort of summer, August hiatus. And Dave, of course, will have the website updated and we'll pop in if we need to. But just so everyone can plan their Saturdays accordingly.
Next week is the last one.
Next week is going to be the last one. And then we'll be back on the Banjo Bowl Saturday. As we always resume then to get back into Jets mode after we take some of that summertime and maybe follow Paulie's lead and have a couple beers on the deck or do some fishing. I know that you're going to be out there. You'll be exploring MB like you always do come summertime.
I will indeed. I will definitely be out and about in this wonderful province of ours. Yeah. So that won't be a problem. And yeah, no, I mean, it's funny how we start the season. We start at Hockey for All Center with that Fan Fest, which again is a way of connecting the community to the fans.
Usually second, third week of September. We don't know the exact date. It'll be somewhere around there. Yeah.
And then we know that, of course, that we get to do this show, and this is a lot of fun. And development camp again is a great way to kind of end the season. Of course, as Drew said, there'll still be some.
Well, it starts with optimism at Fan Fest, and it ends with optimism at development camp.
Yeah, hope springs eternal for all 32 teams. Right?
Absolutely.
But I think that it's just. From our perspective, and of course there's still be some signings and whatnot. Yeah, and there still have been. Well, signings.
That's what I'm saying. There's still, I think, another shoe is going to drop here. I don't think that the Jets are necessarily. There's obviously going to be some. Cole Perfetti needs a new contract, and
and we'll talk about that. Yeah, Murat wrote an article about Cole Perfetti and whether he'll sign a long-term deal here in Winnipeg, and that's probably the right play. I think if you want to give him a chance and you want to kind of buy up some of those years, and maybe you do, and think about him as the future. And maybe if they don't, and they bridge him, we'll see what ends up happening with that. Of course, those ones generally don't get done right away. Those ones will usually drag out into the summer. But again, like Drew says, whenever that happens, we'll bring it to you on illegalcurve.com. And if need be, we can always do a pop-up show. And of course, our summer series, which I'll get to sometime in August, to get a couple of weeks off of doing any of this stuff. But we'll get into those one-on-ones with some of the guys who are the up-and-comings, the next generation of players. Usually who are still with the Moose, but we'll have that coming your way. Yeah, I mean, look, there's still question marks really, like you said, Drew, it's not a ton of question marks, right? Like really, you've just got the question as to what's going to happen with Nikolai Ehlers, which ultimately doesn't need to happen. Like nothing could happen. He's still under contract for next year, so we'll see where that goes. And you know, your point is one that's well made. If you're the Jets and you are cooking along into February or March, that's when you maybe make that acquisition to augment your team, and you don't need to do it at the trade deadline or at free agency. So that I agree, and like we saw what they did in February with Sean Monahan, right?
Yeah.
After Elias Lindholm went to Vancouver, the Jets, who they were in on Lindholm, reportedly, and then of course they pivoted and went to Monahan. So you know, like I said, it'll be interesting, and one of the things that we talk about, and that's. Like I said, I don't like to. I'm not going to force a guy into a position. I'm also not going to take away a position from a guy. So if Elias Salamonson, who's
on the ice behind
us,
on
the ice behind us, he missed the first day of camp, but Jimmy Roy told us he was fine, and he was just apparently I think he has a little laryngitis supposedly. Yeah. So that's why we weren't able to do media with him yesterday. We'll see how he's feeling today. But the point is that you've got a guy who potentially could be on that right side of the Jets next year. Remember, he was one of the last. Guys who was cut from Jets development camp or Jets training camp last year.
Yeah, made an impression last year.
Went down to the Moose, and the organization I really think was taking a hard look as to what they should do for the player and whether they should keep him with the Moose last year or whether they should have sent him overseas and play Sweden and get him a chance to win the championship in the SHL, which coincidentally he did. And again, I won't pretend to be an expert. His skating is phenomenal, though, as I documented yesterday for a bit at the development camp. But here's a guy who, I won't say that he can't make the Jets next year. And similar to Billy Heinola.
The opportunity, look, the opportunity is there. I mean, if he steps up, I mean, the Jets won't force him. If he wins the job at training camp, then the Jets will gladly say, "Congratulations, you've won the job at training camp." I mean, there's no hierarchy. I don't think that the Jets are ever holding anybody down who deserves a job or who's won a job. They rightfully get it. I mean, Billy Heinola last year. I mean, terrible timing with that injury in the last exhibition game, but he was going to be in the starting lineup, and then it was going to require some tweaks on the edges, and the guy who was making more money, Nate Schmidt, was going to be out of the lineup. I mean, that's what happened. So. There's jobs to be won. Come in, win a job, play in the NHL, and if you can stay there, all the power to you. So you get Colin Miller under contract, for the 2 years, which is, again, we talked about, sort of comes as a surprise. Look, if Colin Miller ends up being your 7th or your 8th defenseman because an Elias Salamonson comes in and wins a job, or if Neil Pionk can't find his game and different things happen to that effect, so be it. The Jets, they're going to reward the players who have won the positions. Now, who I think has won the position, who you think has won the position, and who the general public think has won the position might not necessarily be what the coaching staff and the management believe, right. Which is, everyone evaluates in their own way, and it's really only their evaluation that matters the most. But as Kevin Shoveldayoff said earlier this week, opportunity knocks, step up. Seize that opportunity, and you can be a member of this Winnipeg Jets team.
Well, and the perfect example of that is Ville Heinola, because if fans will recall, in my end-of-season Moose availability, not this past year, but the year before, Ville Heinola talked about how important that summer was, how focused he was going to be on training. And he came into training camp, and he was excellent. And he came into training camp, and he earned himself a job. And if not for that September 29th, I think, game in Ottawa, where he, fractures his ankle.
I thought wasn't it here? Maybe it was in Ottawa.
No, I think it was in Ottawa. I'm pretty sure it was in Ottawa. But anyways, the point is that when it happened, he had made the team. He was on the team. They were going to have to make a tough decision. But the point, Drew, overarching, is that, you're not going to artificially depress. Again, obviously, Paul made an important point and an important distinction. Teams have to think now, but they also have to think later. That's the general manager's job, not the coach's job. The coach's job is, I want to win, and I want to win now.
They coach for today.
He's not coaching saying, okay, well, in 3 years, I'll be ready for this team to take the next step, because you may not be the coach in 3 years.
You likely won't be.
So the point is that you're not going to be like, okay, why do you think Scott O'Neill said, when he was asked about Nikolai Ehlers, I want him. I need him.
Yeah.
He said it because
he wants him and he needs him.
Why would he want to lose a dynamic, top 6 guy who they see as potentially having more to his game? So that's why I think if you're looking at it from the Jets' point of view, there are going to be, I don't think they're going to artificially limit guys like Salamonson or Lambert or Chibrikov or not Lucius obviously, but any of those young guys who could force their way. If a young guy's going to force it and take their spot, like we've talked about, doesn't they'll take the spot. And sure, obviously the salary cap comes into effect because you have to pay attention to that sort of thing. But I just think, and waivers and all that, and again, that's where Ville Heinola was
the business of hockey.
Right, and Ville Heinola was a victim of being waiver exempt last year.
No question.
And he's not, whatever, I should say previously, not necessarily so much last year, but the reality is he's no longer waiver exempt. So Ville Heinola will, again, it doesn't mean he's automatically guaranteed a spot. He still needs to have a very good summer because he's going to try and beat out Logan Stanley in all essence, and we don't know if there's going to be a platoon with those guys. Again, it'll be what it's going to be. That's what training camp is for. That's why we go to training camp in early September-ish, and we watch it for 3 weeks, because the fact of the matter is we're not watching to see if Mark Scheifele is going to make the team. We're not watching to see if Josh Morrissey is going to make the team. We're watching training camp to see if those guys are ready to take that next step and to seize that next opportunity.
You're watching for the battles. You're watching for that, Heinola versus Stanley, if you want to make it that simple, or Sal Monson, versus Miller versus Pionk, and where Lambert, if he can win a job, and the backup goaltending situation, Kakkonen and Comrie. I mean, these are the battles that are being waged or are going to be waged at training camp for the Winnipeg Jets. But I thought Paulie also makes a very good point that the Jets are sitting back here now, and I mean, they have some cap space. We know that they have that they have some room, and they're going to have to sign, obviously, Perfetti, and they're going to have to sign Gustafsson and Stanley.
And worth noting, Gustafsson and Stanley did not file for arbitration, which they had to do yesterday by 5 p.m.
That's right. So those guys didn't sign for, didn't file for arbitration. So, but you're sitting there where the Jets are going to have some room, and there are teams that are going to be desperate, and they're not, and what they've done, and Paulie mentioned the Washington Capitals, because they've acquired every player under the sun, no question about it.
The only thing with them, though, is that worth noting they've got Backstrom and Oshie, who most likely would take them to cap compliance if Oshie retires,
right? Which
is an if. And remember, we had John Walton on, was it 2 weeks ago, and we asked about Oshie, and he said, he doesn't know yet what his status is going to be.
Right. But they're right up. They're going to be right up again. And there's other teams right up against it.
Even if those two guys don't play, it's like they're right at the upper limit.
Right, which doesn't give you any flexibility, doesn't give you any, if anything happens, which you have to have some sort of contingency, and there's no contingency built into that. But there are going to be other teams, and the Jets might be in a position where they can sort of, use whatever remaining cap space they might have, to, fortify their lineup even later on this summer. Even, and I got to be honest, they're not headline moves by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not going to say that these are the kind of moves that are going to win you a Stanley Cup or anything, but going out and getting a guy like Hayden Fleury, that's such a no-risk deal. So it's a 1-year contract, $775,000. Dean Chenoweth, coached Hayden Fleury, and Hayden Fleury, when he was a member of the Carolina Hurricanes, I saw somebody say it on Twitter, he was an analytical darling. He put up some, good numbers in soft minutes, admittedly, where there wasn't the, not high pressure, not high stakes situations, but you go out and you get a guy, and maybe he turns into something, or at the very least, he's maybe a member of the Manitoba Moose, and he's somebody that you can rely on in the course of your season. I mean, you're now tweaking around the edges. I mean, we don't know what's happening with this Dylan Coghlan trade. It was, Elliot Friedman reported it.
It's very odd, too, also, the way he wrote it. He's like,
too.
Yeah, because I think he was talking about the Ellie Tolvanen trade, and then he's like...
No, the Ellie Tolvanen signing, yeah.
Signing, sorry.
Exactly, in a separate tweet.
And then he goes, but it was very bizarre to add the word "to," because it's like, to what? Yeah. What else is going on? Are you talking about the Tolvanen one, or are you talking about something else, Elliot? Give us a little insight there. Yeah. But yeah, you're right, Drew. It was funny. It was odd the way he wrote it down.
It was definitely not your typical, probably not the most grammatically correct sentence that's ever been written.
Not that we're going to be the grammar police. No. Ezzy's our grammar police, actually.
I think he's in the chat. Is that what I've understood? He's been in the chat all morning?
That's fine. That's good.
I sort of like it better that way.
Yeah, well, Ezzy wrote that he likes being in the chat better than being on the show anyways. So.
Yeah. Well, we might have a deal then. We'll deal with that afterwards. But, that's where the Jets are at right now. I got to go back, and I know I've sort of said it a couple times. The Colin Miller signing, to me, I thought that Rick Bowness misplayed him by not using him.
Misplayed by not using.
Yeah. he didn't play him. He didn't use him.
Yeah.
I thought there was more to his game, and I mean, he came in for Game 5, if I recall correctly, of the series.
Yeah, he played well.
I thought that was mishandled, and I sort of expected him to go out and not be a member of the Winnipeg Jets. But I think that it could very well turn into a low-cost, beneficial signing for this Winnipeg Jets team.
Well, again, I think what it does is it says, okay, here's a veteran who, if he's your 6th, fine. If he's your 7th, 8th, fine as well. Because if you're the Jets organization, and if you don't see Salamonson as a guy who's going to be on the roster in the top 6, you certainly don't want him as your 7th. You want him, obviously, as playing top pairing minutes for the Manitoba
You don't want him sitting in the press box.
Right. So from that perspective, I think there's an opportunity for these guys to, I was like, did everything just end? And then I realized, no, they're switching. The players or prospects are switching to the other rink.
They're going across. They're going to go across from us rather than behind us.
Yeah. So, and it's always possible there may end up being a scrimmage here, or they may do the scrimmage on the other side. We'll have to find out. But I was a little nervous. I was like, oh wait, this can't be. I want to go. I still need to do media. As C-Mac said, he's been enjoying our videos, and I want everyone to know I got our audio issues. It was very bizarre, but the audio. YouTube depresses the audio a little bit, and so on mobile it totally sounded good or fine, and for whatever reason on a PC it was really quiet. But I boosted everything yesterday, and everybody was back on the train saying that the audio. Tim would know. Tim's our audio visual guy. I'm not the audio visual guy. That's usually Tim, but I was doing those videos and we got them boosted up. So levels are good. If the levels were working good for the interviews yesterday with Colby Barlow and Thomas Milich and Mark Morrison, let us know. And if you had any problems, you can also let us know.
There you go.
Let Tim know, though, if you have problems.
Tim has nothing to do with that audio, but it's nice that you're throwing him under the bus anyways. Look, that's where you're at with the Winnipeg Jets at this point in time. You largely know what the roster is going to be. I mean, there's certainly opportunities, but there's not a lot that's sort of left there. You know what this team is likely going to look like. You know where their strengths are. You know where the areas of concern are. And I mean, in particular, it's where they were last year. It's on the back end. It's on that right side of that defense. Now, now that you've acquired Colin Miller, you're like, okay, can you deal with DeMello, Pionk, and Colin Miller as your right side defense? Well, it's not superb by any stretch of the imagination, but it's probably doable to start the year at the very least. Would the Jets be looking still to acquire a right side defenseman if a Rutger McGroarty trade were to happen this offseason? Probably. That seems like there's an area of opportunity there. But largely, where this Winnipeg Jets team is going to be, and that's why they still, which is similar to last year's team. It's a good regular season team, assuming Connor Hellbuck stays healthy, and assuming everybody else stays the same. Oh, look who's here!
Oh, Scotty B.
The last time you were here, you did the creepy photo where you come over here and you try and eat my shoulder or something.
Ezra's not here.
You can go on the mic if you want for a minute. You can come sit down and say hello.
Hello.
Doing double duty, covering the Bomber game last night, and now here at Dev Camp.
I'm here. I just walked in. I haven't had a coffee yet.
You haven't had a coffee
These are
yet?
nice. Are these yours?
You can have one.
No, it's not a flat brim.
You only wear flat
I'm not
brims?
a cool kid. I'm like a cool. It's not totally flat, but you know how it goes.
I do. I like a flat brim hat.
How's the
I never
show
used
going?
to. Show's going great.
Yeah, good.
Talking about some hockey. How are you?
Yeah.
How's the summer been?
Good, yeah. Bombers won last night.
They did.
This isn't a football show, but...
We talked, we had a legal procedure back in the day.
You did have a legal procedure back in the day.
For all of 10 minutes.
Yeah, it wasn't long, eh?
No, so we defer to the others on the Bomber stuff largely at this point in time. Our buddy DB and Zach Schnitzer and the boys at Bonfire Sports did a great job covering that. And you covered the game last night. Old school football last night.
It was punishing. That game hurt watching it. Yeah. It's very rare that you see a 11-play drive, 70 yards, touchdown, and every single play was on the ground.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It was entertaining, though. It was a
good.
beautiful night.
I don't. It's not sustainable.
No.
I don't think Chris Streveler can do another week or maybe two max, and that's it.
Well, if there was any question, it's Streveler is a great complementary piece, but he cannot be your starting quarterback.
But you can't be running 12 times, 13 times like he did last night, taking some of those wallops.
Well, and he can't really throw.
Yes, he made a nice toss to Nick Dembski in the third quarter. I want to say it was. Yeah, so
that was his nicest throw of the game.
But he missed Oliveira on a little kind of alley-oop. I want to say that was in the second, maybe even back in the first. And it's like, if he makes that, they get. But Bombers' defense was unbelievable last night.
Great.
Sergio Castillo 6 for 6, 253 yarders, a 49 yarder. So Elias Salamonson, too. Yeah.
Well,
all the prospects were there last night.
Yeah?
Did you talk about that?
Well, we
they
mentioned that
there.
they were all enjoying. Winnipeg looked good last night in terms of the city. If you're sitting out there and if you never,
it was a beautiful night.
It was a beautiful night.
Could have used a little more of a breeze, but it is what it is. So.
Drinking, I guess you can't drink beer up in the press box.
Beer,
I was able to tip a few back and enjoy it that way. So a little bit of a different.
Well,
I always get texts from people. They're like, is it really is there not that many people there? I'm like, no, they're just in the concourse.
They're all partying.
If they ever just showed.
Well, that's
they need like a concourse cam or whatever.
Hustler's holding, at the run.
I remember there was a game. I mean, we've obviously digressed, but we do that frequently on this show. But there was a game a couple years ago. The Bombers were blowing out whatever team it was, and I think Matt Dunnigan was doing color on the game, and he only does color a few games. And they were showing, the game was such a blowout. They weren't even showing the field that much anymore. But they were showing the concourse, and he's like, "That's where I want to be." It's like, look at that party that's going on there.
It's the biggest party in Manitoba every week. So
it's not. That's
good time.
All right, hold on. Let's get it back to hockey, Scotty.
Okay.
Even though you're not an expected guest, we'd love to have you. And you wrote a few articles recently.
Get out of here if you
No.
I'm going to get bumped in 5 minutes when Murat shows up.
I'm promoting your recent article on the Winnipeg Sun. I mean, you wrote about the sort of the path the Jets are on and what they're doing. So maybe just expand on that for folks who read it and were curious more about your
Well,
thoughts.
let's clarify that I don't think the Jets had a bad July 1st.
Okay.
I'm just thinking my whole process or my whole idea was they tried to have a bad July 1st and then kind of knee-jerk reaction said that they were going to start a youth renaissance, right? Like it was like it almost wanted to say you're trying to re-sign Sean Monahan, Blake Lizotte, you tried to sign Adam Henrique. He said Brendan Dillon, although I have information that would suggest otherwise, that he was never coming back here.
Well,
regardless,
the Brendan Dillon one, I still don't see a slot for him.
Right, but my point is, so all the youth have opportunities, but only after you tried to go and get a bunch of veterans. So that was my issue, if you would call it. I don't even know if it's an issue. It's just, what's the direction of the team? That's all.
Like an incongruency that you're saying one thing on earlier in the week and then saying something else a couple days later.
Well, it's even just the action, right? Like the actions did not, the actions didn't match up to what he was saying. Yeah. So it's just want to know what the direction of the team is. And if you are leading youth movement, I think there's a lot of people we've seen all week that there's a lot of people who want to see the youth come up and sort of take over this team a little bit. Yeah.
But I think it's important to note that when the youth comes up, and let's assume there's going to be some youth injected into the lineup for this coming season, it's not being injected into a role that I think that they're being relied on to carry the team. That they're being the youth is coming in almost as complementary pieces to the veterans that you already have established who know how to play, which is a good, I think, spot for the youth to come into.
Right. Like I think Villy comes in and plays potentially the third pairing with a veteran of some sort. Might be Colin Miller. Sure. Who knows? Hayden Fleury. I mean, they've signed all these sort of depth guys. After a lot of guys left in free agency from the Moose, so they had to do that. So, but you wonder, like, okay, well, who's playing your second line center role? Is it Vladdy, or because you replaced Vladdy at a month before the trade deadline?
Right.
So you obviously saw that was a position of weakness, even if we don't necessarily see it that way. They needed to bring Sean Monahan into a multitude of things, from face-offs to power play to whatever, right? So, are you going to put Cole Perfetti, Gabe Velarde, or Brad Lambert in your second line center? Because that's a big position to play, right?
Right.
We saw that they tried it with Cole last year, didn't necessarily work out. Yeah. Well, it didn't work out. I think you just worry about. Okay, it's fine. I wonder. When they signed Connor Hellbuck and Mark Scheifele, there was basically a promise made that this team was going to contend.
Right.
Are you taking your foot off the pedal for a year to try and contend for the next several?
But I don't, and I understand where you're coming from.
And I don't think there's a problem with that.
Right.
But just say it.
But I also don't know that. I understand where you're coming back from with that perspective. But I also don't necessarily see them taking their foot off the pedal. I mean, you're not. You don't win the Stanley Cup in October. You don't have to have your Stanley Cup roster to start the year, which is what they had last year, where they had a they had a good team. Oh, here's Mike McIntyre coming in also. Come join the conversation, Mike. Everybody, more
I was told
the
I'm
merrier.
being replaced by Murat, so yeah. I don't know if it's the A team. Yeah.
But I think you can have Vladdy as your second line center in October and November and December, and then if you decide that you want to make additions at that point in time, you can do so. No one's ever going to recommend you trade your first round pick for a rental year in and year out. It doesn't.
Right.
It's not a recipe for success.
Yeah.
But if you're playing well in the regular season and things are going well in the regular season and the lineup is basically the same as last year, so it should. Emphasis on should go well during the regular season. Then you can make those tweaks a little bit later on, rather than being pot committed for 4, 5, 6 years with some of these free agency guys.
But you pot committed yourself with Scheifele and Hellebuck for the next 7 years.
But
at 30, right?
But those are the guys. I mean, you have to have.
Don't
some,
get me wrong. There's nothing wrong. Those are your cornerstones of your franchise.
Right.
You're going to have those contracts.
And so those are the guys who can bear the weight, while the young guys maybe begin to get their feet under them at the NHL level 100%. Earlier in the season.
Like I said, I don't want this. And what I wrote to confuse the fact that I think they tried. I think the problem is that they tried to do what everybody is sort of praising them for not doing. Right.
That's
and
fair.
I think that's my criticism of whatever went on Monday.
Sure.
Was they tried to do it. The only thing is they couldn't get it done because it's free agency, and we know around here it's very difficult to sign free agents, even keep the ones that you have.
But I think putting your foot in the water to test it, and then pulling it out when it gets to be too cold, like if when Monahan
they pulled it out when it was too cold.
Well, I mean, I have to assume that they didn't go 5 years for Monahan.
That might have been a sticking point, but then you go to Adam Henrique, who's 4 years older than Monahan.
Right, but I mean, I would assume that Henrique is a 1 year or a 2 year deal. I mean, that's what he goes for.
But that's still blocking somebody, unless Henrique is going to be your fourth line center, right? Because you still got Vladdy for another year, I think, at least.
Well, he signed a 2 year deal
so he's got 1 more year.
Yeah. No, you're totally right. I mean, it makes what you're saying. Their actions didn't necessarily match their words. Right. To start, and then you're like, okay, well,
also the Dylan Coghlan trade is official now.
Okay. Was it for the conditional seventh?
It is for exchange for future considerations.
Okay, old school.
Breaking news on Illegal Curve.
Thank you. We appreciate
Saturday
that.
mornings.
Future Well, we've been waiting for about almost. It's been about what 21 hours since Elliott.
It's a weird tweet too, right? Because he said 2 at the end of it, and he had 2 tweets that sort of back to back.
We're like, what else is happening? What else is happening?
Yeah. So, anyways.
There you go. Well,
whatever. Yeah, I'm all right with.
So Dylan Coghlan again.
Like,
I mean,
it's good to have depth, right?
It's a flyer. It doesn't cost you anything.
Coghlan was a pretty good player in Vegas, right? He just hasn't played a lot, and
he put up big numbers at the AHL level.
He did, and he went to a Carolina team that's just, to me, has been the class of the league in terms of defense.
Right.
Over the last 7-8 years.
Yeah.
I mean, they've had Slavin and Shea and Brent Burns and Pesce.
Yeah.
I mean, they've had all these guys that have come through there and played, and they're one of the best defensive teams in the league consistently every year.
Wasn't Coghlan part of the Pacioretty salary dump?
He might have been part of that, right?
Yeah, I think that's...
And it's just unfortunate for Coghlan because he played 59 games in 21-22, I think it was.
With Vegas.
Yeah. And he had 13 points, and whatever. I mean, he's not going to wow you with the stats,
right.
But
what if you can acquire
big shot, right shot D? I mean,
they don't grow on trees.
And this is the thing, like, you got to give credit to Kevin Cheveldayoff here.
Yeah.
There is a huge hole in depth on this team, or there was a huge hole in depth on this team when it came to right shot defensemen.
Right.
So who's he added? He's added Hayden Fleury, and he's added Coghlan, and he re-signed Colin Miller. I mean,
lots of buy low.
Right, you have it's low risk, high reward, right?
Yeah.
Or mid reward or whatever, right? I mean, Hayden Fleury is a former first round pick.
Yeah,
he just hasn't worked out for him.
But he had his great. But we were talking about this earlier. He had a lot of success and was an analytical darling with Dean Chenoweth.
Yeah,
as his assistant coach. So I mean, get the band back together a little bit.
Anything's possible, right? And I think it's good to at least have the depth that promotes. You're going to need it in camp unless they make some sort of big trade here over the summer where they bring in a right shot D.
Well, let me ask you that. So that's what Dave and I were talking about. That the roster.
Well, right now I don't know how they do it.
Well,
I mean, unless it's
Rutger.
Rutger. I mean, it depends who you bring in, right? Like, you're probably looking for an RFA, sort of like Coghlan is, but I don't want to say better, but you know what I mean. Like, you know, Better, right? I mean, I think that's the right word. I mean, you're looking for a guy who
an established NHL player.
Like you can be, but is young enough that you still have some sort of team control over him, right? Or you're getting a guy that's still got 3 years left on his deal, something like 2 or 3 years left.
So
on
you
his
know
deal,
he's going to be here for a while.
He's going to be here for a while.
Do you think that a Rutger?
I think they're open to it. 100% they are. I think you have to be, right? Because I think even right now, you look at your defense, and you're probably not thinking this defense is better than last year's.
No.
Because you removed Brendan Dillon, and Brendan Dillon's a really good player. And I think the Jets found out real quick how difficult life was in the playoffs when Brendan Dillon got his hand cut open after Game 3. And Brendan Dillon was very good, and he brought that physical element. Don't get me wrong. Like I think Ville Heinola is going to come in and play well for this team. It's about time, but I do wonder. I do wonder right now at this point. I don't think the defense is better. Like even with Nate Schmidt not there, it's better because Nate Schmidt's contract isn't on the books.
Right.
But Nate Schmidt was a good partner for Dylan Samberg.
Yeah. And they won their minutes.
And then Neil Pionk's sort of a bit of an outlier for me because I'm not entirely sure.
Right.
He's struggled, right? And so are they going to play him big top 4 minutes again?
Well, they don't seem to have an option right now unless somebody else steps up or they acquire somebody.
Yeah, so I think you're still in the market for it, is what I'm saying. But I don't know, is the Rutger situation different now? Like that's the other, like I don't know. Like I mean, we don't know because nobody's talking on either side. And Rutger McGroarty still liking Jets tweets and all that. Is it? I mean, we all heard Sean Reynolds this past week thinking this is just part of the, this is what you do. It's great PR. It's whatever. It's showing that you want to be here, but the team doesn't want to, develop you or in the way that you want to, right? It's sort of still,
it's a crazy presumptuous thing though to assume. And again, I honestly, I'm one who for the last little bit has espoused that I'm not sure I believe the narrative that's out there whole hog at least. But I will say, like, could you imagine how presumptuous that would be for a kid drafted in 2022 to be like, you know what, I really don't like the development path that you have selected for me, so I'm going to choose it for myself instead. I'm just saying,
which they can do. I mean, this is the thing with the problem that when you're a college kid is you sort of have that out. You always have that 4-year sort of out.
Yeah.
That you can, by the time you're 22, or whenever you go to, whenever you get to college.
Yeah.
And whatever.
You can stick it out.
That you can stick it out and choose your choose your path.
But Scotty, Drew made a good point. I mean, the NIL money obviously is a factor, but I mean, in college hockey, it's not the same as basketball and football. No, it's certainly not the same as pro, but it's certainly also not the same as with kids who are making college NIL money or college football, college basketball. All I was going to say is 2 years is a long time. 2 years is a long time, and Rutger also sustained a major injury. One, he was ironically thankful that the Jets organization was so good to him when he did, and my point is that your career could be finite. You could have something happen
100%.
tomorrow. So I mean, it is
I just saw a tweet. The Vikings 2024 4th-round draft pick just passed away in a car accident.
Holy okay, almost swore.
That's the real extreme.
But that's
I guess what I'm saying though is that
nothing's guaranteed in
nothing's
this sport.
guaranteed, and except for the fact that if you sign a contract, it's guaranteed.
But I think when you see what Cutter Gauthier did, right?
Yeah.
Here's the thing. You sort of put the Jets or any team in a bind when you say, I'm not going to sign for you, right? And so when you don't sign for a team, or you say that your intention isn't to sign for the team, they sort of have to trade you sooner rather than later, because as time goes on, the amount of the return value diminishes over time, right? Because the closer the guy gets to free agency. Or to becoming a UFA,
next summer,
teams can just wait. So
it's a much different animal next summer.
That's the thing, right? I think you have to sort of trade him now, or I don't know what, because when you're a year out, it's different. I don't know what the issues are, so I really don't know what the sticking point is at this point, right?
If it's something as silly as you might have to start at the AHL level, it's just so
and
bizarre.
I know Mike McIntyre's talked about this at length, or I don't know about at length, but a lot, is that if this is an issue with his advisors sort of not advising him properly, it's interesting. And I said this on WST yesterday, Winnipeg Sports Talk.
So everybody, what you're saying?
Anybody who knows is watching this show knows what a WST is.
But what I said yesterday, and it's interesting with Rutger is, when Kevin Cheveldayoff came out on Monday and said, there's opportunity for the young guys. This is an exciting time to be. Was that sort of Kevin Cheveldayoff's ability to unvarnished, unfiltered, here, Rutger, this is what I'm saying, not what you're hearing from your advisors, not whatever, right? It could be that not the case at all. This is wild speculation, right? I mean, but is that the message that Kevin Cheveldayoff wanted to get across? Is there is an opportunity for you this year.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And whatever your advisors or whoever is talking to, whoever's in your ear saying...
That's what I'd love to know is who's in his ear.
And so that's the thing, right? But, this is the way it is because Rutger knows Cutter Gauthier.
Yeah.
And he's seeing teammates Frank Nazar and Gavin Brindley
on
can have some
Chicago,
time.
Though, right?
Oh, no, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I don't think that matters to a young player, right?
No, for sure
I
not.
see my friends playing, I want to play.
Yeah.
Right? It has nothing to do with we're the Vegas Golden Knights or the Florida Panthers, the Edmonton Oilers,
Scotty,
or whatever.
He had FOMO just not being at training camp last year.
Wow. That's what he said, yes. Again, the thing is we just don't know what's going on in his mind, what he's being told, and what he has been told from the Jets, right? Nobody's talking. I think Kevin Cheveldayoff was frustrated on Monday. Partly, I think it is a culmination of things. One, it was a tough day for him in free agency. Two, I think this whole situation it sucks for him, right? It's a tough situation to be in. The kids told you everything that you want them to hear. We've heard that there's been no red flags with the guy.
And
so
then
what does that mean?
Something out of your control.
So something changed, right? Now, was it the fact that, you wanted him to go the route of, Kyle Connor or whoever, right, to play some time in the Moose and Adam Lowry and Josh Morrissey and all the guys that played at least some time with the Moose? Was that an issue? Or was the issue, who knows, right? I don't know. I mean, he's not a fourth line winger,
No, he's played, again, he's 2 years of college. I mean, let's remember, and a guy who's skating. Colby Barlow talked about his skating yesterday at the media availability and talked about how he
and I thought that was interesting, right? I thought that those guys saying it was a bit of a reality check to go up to the Moose and say okay, I've played at this level. This is the level I need to get at.
Well, and that's my whole point. Like I said, people ask me how did Barlow look. I'm like, he looked good, but he also didn't necessarily look like a guy who was ready to compete at that level quite yet. His skating needed work. Similarly, again, McGroarty. What's one of the biggest things about him was that his skating needs work. So you're at the NHL level. You're not. This isn't the AHL. It's not junior. It's not college. This is the NHL.
But I don't fault a 20-year-old from being hey,
Murat, aren't you supposed to be on with us? At some point in time.
Well, but 11 minutes ago.
I'm going to get out of here.
No, you can sit too. You can pull up a chair if you want.
I don't know. Nothing interesting.
But no, don't go far because we want to talk to you about your Cole Perfetti article from The Athletic.
Let's go one more minute. Let Scotty finish his thought.
Okay,
we'll go
Scotty,
to break.
I don't know if I think I finished my thought.
Okay, go to break. Go to break.
Whatever you want. Yeah.
Alrighty, Scotty Billick, have a great summer, buddy. Well, I'm sure we'll see you around, everyone.
Oh,
there you go.
We're always around.
I know, we're not going anywhere. There's Scotty Billick. We're doing a bit of a pop-on cameo here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We'll take a break. Murat will be up next. He's going to talk about his Cole Perfetti article.
Murat.
I always mispronounce it, but I give him a hug now that I see him. Yeah.
Murat. Scott and Murat. Could be a podcast.
Yeah, Scott and Murat.
You think Murat, but it's Murat. I learned that long ago.
Okay, but
I just listened to him tell me what his name was, and I just go by it now.
I asked him.
But I wave at the guy now. You can't expect me to get his name right
I don't
and wave at
assume
him.
his name. I just try and I just ask him what his name is, and that's it.
There you go. Say my name. It's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We'll go to break real quick.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
The game can change just like that. Accidents happen when you aren't protected. So now what? Getting to your injury quickly can make all the difference. Help prevent them from being game changers with Linden Market Dental Center. Bonding, crowns, bridges, and dental implants. State-of-the-art treatments are available to help you get back in the game. To learn more, visit lindenmarketdentalcenter.com. Creating smiles for life.
It's all over, folks, and the run has come to an end.
You'll be so far away.
A Canadian team hasn't won the Cup in over 30 years.
And the Cup will stay south of the border.
Maybe it's time we try something different. This playoff season, let's cheer with the fans we've always cheered against. Team up for the Cup at Boston Pizza. We did it again!
You're on fire, man.
There's power in a handshake after a great game or great deal. It shows professionalism and respect. Two qualities Zappia Group Realty take pride in. You don't build a business where 95% of your clients are referred by others without honesty, integrity, and total dedication to client satisfaction. To sell your home for more in less time, shake hands with Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Get started at zappiagroup.com.
Alrighty, back at Hockey for All Center, Winnipeg Jets Development Camp. We've swapped one fantastic media member for another from The Athletic, Murat Atesh joining us. Did I get that right?
Nailing it. I appreciate it.
It's only been what? You've only been around here for about a decade. So by 20 years, I'll get your last name right, something like that. I'm a
better
professional.
than many. Better than many.
Thank you.
And honestly, it just works.
Okay. Well, that's good. As long as I wave now, that's the important part. I got to wave and everything else. So we've crossed that bridge. I'm waving. Sorry, I'm back to waving. I didn't realize I have to wave.
I'm
right
you're
now.
actually ignoring his wave right now.
Sorry, I didn't realize what was happening there. You wrote a great article about Cole Perfetti in The Athletic, and we encourage it. It's on illegalcurve.com. You can also, of course, get it on The Athletic. Just maybe for those who haven't had the opportunity to read the article, you say the Jets should commit long-term to Cole Perfetti, that they should sign him. Not a bridge deal has been the MO of the club so often, but to sign him long-term. Sort of maybe walk us through the logic and the thinking for the audience who may have not had an opportunity to read the article.
For sure. I think that if I pitched, a 7 or an 8 year, $6 million per season deal to a lot of Jets fans that didn't hear me out, they'd be like, hey, wait a second, what has he done that's warranting of that cap hit and that size? Mm-hmm. But where Winnipeg is right now, with development being such a key focus item, and that it's been the MO of the organization for a long time, with a lot of success early on and a little bit less success lately, less first-round picks, all that sort of stuff, I think that it's become more important than ever to have really strong contributing young players on the team. One thing that Winnipeg's free agency does to play into this is that Winnipeg tried to sign Sean Monahan. It tried to sign Brendan Dillon. Maybe it didn't match the contract lengths, the term, but the hope was that Winnipeg was going to be spending more of its cap space as well than it did. So what are you supposed to do with that? The premier free agents are gone. You can try a Nikolai Ehlers trade, you can try Rutger McGroarty trade, but if you're really looking to maximize the fact that the Winnipeg Jets have cap space right now, then let's talk about Cole Perfetti. One of the reasons why, from the team's perspective, a bridge deal for Perfetti makes sense is that they're cheaper. You could sign him for 2 years. I think Gabriel Velarde's bridge deal in a similar situation a year ago was $3.64 million or something to that effect. Mm-hmm. Winnipeg has room for that. That would be nice and easy for them to do. If you look long-term, though, Winnipeg's best contract work historically.
Sure.
Mark Scheifele, long-term, $6.125 million. Nikolai Ehlers, $6 million. Kyle Connor, $7 million. And these are for guys like Scheifele and Connor in the top 20 of NHL scoring over the life of their contract. Nikolai Ehlers, 18th in the NHL in points per minute at 5-on-5 over the life of that contract. They're killing it on these deals for these young, early 20s players through the prime of their career towards 30 years old. And I think Cole Perfetti at $6 million, and that's just a made-up number to be clear, buys Winnipeg an awful lot of cap space a few years from now when he's getting that top 6 role in all of those power play minutes. And now he's producing, and now he's looking at, $7 million this year isn't $7 million when Kyle Connor got it, because the cap has gone up a whole bunch of times, right? So The long and the short of it, I think, is that the longer term that Winnipeg's able to go on him, they'll be able to keep his cap down. And then when the Brad Lamberts need their money, when the Elias Salomonsons need their money, when Thomas Milic and Dom DeVincentis are starring, whatever the story you want to tell, you're going to be in a better cap position down the line.
Yeah. Well, you know what, Murat, that leads into my question, because it wasn't that long ago that Cole Perfetti was one of these young guys at the development camp and playing, trying to earn his spot in the roster or somewhere in the organization. Just from, hope springs eternal at this point of the year, what have you noticed in the last few days of development camp? What players have kind of stood out to you and kind of caught your eye?
Yeah, you know what? I have a tough time looking at development camp without thinking about Rutger McGroarty and his impact on it last year. Mm-hmm. And I know you guys have talked about it. We've talked about it. It's a common conversation. We don't need a deep dive Rutger McGroarty in that sense. But one thing he does is take up a lot of space in a room. He's like a really charismatic guy, right? Yeah. Real funny guy, real bright, energetically. He and Colby Barlow were a two-man show last year. So one of the things I've been looking for is who steps into that space. Mm-hmm. And I think Brad Lambert has really felt more at home, more comfortable in terms of his spot as a leader here. That's one of the things that's really stood out in Sean for me. Even Thomas Milic, after a year of pro, there's just a comfort and a sensibility about these guys that I think that you hoped to see in addition to all of the on-ice stuff, because this is your next generation of leaders, whether it's at the Moose this year, whether it's in the NHL before too long. And I think with McGroarty, the so-called future captain, not looking like a long-term Jet at all, you wonder what that next generation looks like. And I think Winnipeg's okay, and I think that's a good message to take out of development camp.
Yeah, it's well said. Exactly. The next wave of Winnipeg Jets players is right on the verge, and before we know it, they're going to be contributing at the NHL level. I guess looking at this roster for next season, I mean, probably the majority of the work has been done. We all have a fairly good idea of where this team is how it's going to shape up, how it's going to look for next year. I guess, what were your impressions of some of the moves that Kevin Cheveldayoff did make? We know the ones he didn't make. He's been, we've talked about those ones. The ones he did make so far this offseason, what's your impression about how that has sort of maybe changed the dynamic of the Jets, if at all?
I'm going to try to do this chronologically.
Okay.
I think Eric Comrie was the first one announced.
Mm-hmm. Which we all, we predicted that. We all predicted that many months ago at this point in time.
There's no way a regular listener to Illegal Curve was stunned by that news. So, I mean, that's an exciting one. You like the guy so much. He's had success at the NHL level, mostly behind Connor Hellebuck. That was that one great season. Yeah. He's had a ton of AHL success. You guys have been all over the records he owns for the Manitoba Moose, right? So he's almost the perfect person-player combination to be that number 3 in my mind.
Sure.
Unless he's taken a big step forward and surprises us a little bit. Kaapo Kähkönen, I think, was a really astute signing. Yeah. I think that goalie has done so well whenever he's played in front of real defense.
Yeah.
And, San Jose at times a bit shambolic on that front, and I think that he did a good job of things anyway, so I think he's probably the more likely backup for me. I like those ads a lot. Value per dollar and quality for the role that they have.
Sure.
Great moves on that part.
Yeah. Comrie and Scheifele, I mean, you speak about Comrie. I mean, the last time we had Comrie on the show, this is, before he went to Buffalo. This would be going back a few years ago. Remember, Scheifele was at his house in California. Like, they were training in the offseason together. They are close friends. So even if Comrie doesn't
officiated his wedding.
There you go, even more.
Right? Josh Morrissey was in his wedding. He was in Josh Morrissey's wedding. Like, there's a group of guys here that really love each other, right? There's a real bond there. That's amazing to me. And I would love to know. I think I talked to Mark about it at one point, but what was Scheifele's experience like getting, is it called getting ordained to do?
I think so.
Is that, like online or whatever the process would be?
Yeah. We'll have to ask Rabbi Leibel about that. We'll go full circle on that front.
Colin Miller was an impressive sort of circle back for me that at $1.5 million, he's a third pairing defenseman with top 4 experience. So in a pinch, you'd like to think he can handle that.
Yeah. I thought that one. I like that one a lot. I mean, I think it's probably a sign from the organization to some degree that maybe Rick Bowness didn't handle him like the organization would have wanted him to handle Colin Miller. Maybe given him more of an opportunity last year. But the fact you can get him, even if he ends up as your 7th or you're 8th. I mean, at $1.5 million, it's not an unreasonable amount of money. But I do think that there's a little bit more. There's some meat on the bone for him as a player, and I would not be surprised if he flourished in the third pairing role for the Jets.
Yeah, he's got a bomb of a shot, which is kind of fun, and just in terms of watching it go down. I think that maybe a lot of us, I don't know if you guys felt this way, thought, well, with the limited minutes he got, and then he stays out of the playoffs until late, I mean, why would he want to come back?
Right.
But maybe he sizes up the market. Winnipeg has a really nice fail-safe if they're trying to sell anything to last year's team. If you're Cole Perfetti looking for new, fresh minutes, if you're Colin Miller looking to become an everyday player, you can just say, well, hey, Rick Bowness viewed things this way, and now we have Scott Arniel, and he loves you, right?
Sure.
Like, it's a real safe thing that they can do at this stage.
Well, listen to what Scott Arniel has said about Nikolai Ehlers and about Cole Perfetti. He's, if there was any ruffled feathers, to go back and use that old Paul Maurice term, right? Mm-hmm. If there were any ruffled feathers, regarding, Perfetti and his usage and Ehlers and his usage and maybe Colin Miller, I think Scott Arniel is probably trying to sort of smooth those over and saying all the right things publicly to get those players to realize, yes, a lot of similarities, maybe structure-wise and culture-wise, but opportunity will be there that may not have been there under Rick Bowness.
Okay, and I was going to let Murat go right into it, but I'm just going to jump in because I thought Chevy's comments on Friday were interesting, and I'm going to quote him. But if I'm a young player in the Jets organization today, I'm pretty excited about the opportunities that are in front of me, and I'm working pretty hard in the offseason to make sure I could take full advantage. So from your reading of that, who is that message to? And I know you obviously can't tell me exactly explicitly, unless you had a conversation with Kevin Cheveldayoff that you'd care to share on the show. But from your reading of that or your listening of that, what is your takeaway as to who that message is to?
Yeah, I think in a really broad sense, every prospect within the organization, as well as some of the younger players like Cole Perfetti on the roster, there's so many different ways to go with it. Perfetti, ready for top 6 minutes. And under Scott Arniel during that autumn stretch that he had, he was close to a point per game. He wasn't getting the third period benchings. He was getting onto the power play. There's a lot to like. He's at a stage of his career where, again, a second line and some power play makes a ton of sense for him. But that's not the shocker here, right? I think that with Winnipeg's inability, in one sense, to add veterans to block the youth, now there's opportunity. There's probably, if you're Brad Lambert making your case for an NHL job this year, it probably got better after July 1, knowing that Sean Monahan isn't there, that Tyler Toffoli isn't there, that those spaces aren't necessarily taken up. So I think that means a lot. I think on defense, same thing. Dylan Samberg has an opportunity as of right now to be a top 4 defenseman, which I think he's ready for in some ways with growing pains.
Yeah.
It'll be his first year doing that in the NHL. And if he can do that at his cap hit and his mid-20s relative youth, that's a huge win. But also, I cannot go through this paragraph without wondering what it may have meant to Rutger McGroarty to hear that sort of thing. Because, the idea of wanting that NHL playing time, well, hey, wait a second, there's no guaranteed job here, but there's no guaranteed jobs in a lot of places.
Right.
And any properly deep team that's competing for a playoff spot. So maybe the hope was that he'd hear that and think twice, like, wait a second.
I mean, I think you summed it up pretty well there. That there is the opportunity, and you wonder where the Rutger McGroarty situation plays out over the rest of the coming weeks and the months. I mean, we're quickly getting to the dog days of summer, where the NHL world, it'll be another few weeks, but the NHL world will really quiet down, and before you know it, you'll be right around the corner back here for FanFest and the start of training camp. It's amazing how quickly time flies sometimes. But the Winnipeg Jets, I think, are in a pretty decent situation, very similar to where they would have been, I would say, at the start of last season. And then obviously hope will be that they have similar regular season results with better playoff results moving forward at that point in time.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people on July 1 were devastated at all the misses and all these moves unmade. But what's the difference between the roster, from last season's training camp and today? You've lost Brendan Dillon, and that's substantial. That is definitely substantial. He's a unique player. Dylan Samberg gets the step up. And then beyond that, hey, you didn't have Sean Monahan a year ago at this time. You didn't have Tyler Toffoli a year ago at this time. That Perfetti, Nemesnikov, and Ehlers line was actually pretty darn good.
Pretty good,
you still have Scheifele, Connor, and Velarde. Like, there's a lot of things that you might continue to like about the Winnipeg Jets.
Well, that's my point. That was my point, really. I've mentioned this a couple times over the last couple of hours while we've been on here, is that, the roster on September 1st or October 1st when the season begins doesn't have to be the roster, come playoff time. So if you're a good regular season team, like they were last year, and then they see that there's, maybe they want to tweak here or tweak there, well, you can go and do that mid-season. You don't have to do that on July 1st and cause you cap problems for years on end after that. And that's, I think, where the Winnipeg Jets are. Yeah, we have the similar forward group. The defense has still got question marks like it did last year. But we also have Connor Hellebuyck, and so there's no reason why, yes, some of the Central Division teams did get better, but there's no reason why this team should take a significant step back and have to be going through sort of a rebuilding or a retooling cycle with the veteran presence they have both up front and on the back end.
I think the tougher thing is going to be to live up to 52 wins and 110 points.
I don't expect that they're going to. I mean, that would be unusual for them to match that, simply because the competition they're going to be going up against is better. Utah is better. Nashville's better. St. Louis, I don't know if they're any better. Chicago is going to be a little bit better just because they have a little more.
Always played them tough though last year.
Yeah,
so.
They have a little more talent around Bedard now. So there's going to be. They're going to have to find that improvement. And they talked about it at the exit interviews, where all the veteran guys were saying, how can we get 10% better? And it's hard to believe that, Josh Morrissey has 10% more to grow, or Mark Scheifele has 10% more to grow. But that's what they have to sort of find a way to do, even if it's, collectively, they all have to find a way to be 10% better to make this team be more than just 5 games and out in the first round of the playoffs.
That's one of the most fascinating parts of the offseason for me, is that people talked about soul searching in a way that I, sitting in the chair, believed. Mm-hmm. Because at any end of season, people are disappointed. They want to be better next year, right? Just like in the offseason, everybody's in the best shape of their life. There are stories you tell in the NHL that serve the moment, and then there's stories that are a little bit more unique because there's truth to them or they stand out a little bit more. And I believe that with at least a couple of these Winnipeg Jets veterans, and Josh Morrissey, Adam Lowry, Connor Hellebuyck, I would say those three, when I heard them speak, I heard them, to my interpretation, genuinely chewing over things.
Yeah.
It was not platitudes to me. I thought it was a sense of a real need to look deep within themselves, to solve problems that have yet been, unsolved to this point. And maybe it's not about getting more explosive at 30 years of age, but it's about handling different situations a little bit better. And to that extent, I don't know that that's worth 20 standings points or 10 standings points, or I don't know what it's worth at all. Maybe just a touch more resilience in the playoffs. I left those conversations with more belief in what they were telling me than last year or 2 years ago or 3 years ago.
Yeah. We'll leave it there. I can't think of a better way to finish the show, finish the interview. Murat Atesh of The Athletic always does great work covering the Winnipeg Jets. Big summer plans?
I'll be cheering for Team Canada's men's national team for as far as they go.
Okay.
Semis against Argentina is going to be exciting.
You and Sidney Crosby.
Yeah. That's cool. We have a writer from The Athletic there, and I guess he got to just talk to Sidney Crosby about soccer for The Athletic for great length or whatever. So cool. That's up. Also, my ancestral country, Turkey, is in Euro right now. Yeah. So quarters against the Netherlands coming up shortly.
Yeah, Murat said do not text him at 2 o'clock because he will not be responding for at least 90 minutes or something along those lines. And if the the result is what we want, because I have no affiliation whatsoever with the Netherlands, so I'll cheer for Turkey along your side. We'll see you go honking the horn. And Tim's, are you Dutch?
Rowdy the Dutch Jets fan.
The Dutch Jets fan. Oh my God, I forgot about Rowdy. We're causing problem. Yeah, I know. Okay, somebody's gonna win, and
True or false? I was once in Turkey, in Istanbul, for the UEFA Cup, and
okay, hang on, we got breaking news.
What?
Jets have signed David Gustafsson and Logan Stanley to 2-year contract extensions. Just coming out right now. David Gustafsson has an average annual value of $835, and Stanley has an AAV of 1.25.
Whoa.
So there you go.
Breaking news. No.
Yeah, good thing we went overtime. Normally we'd be done at 11, but instead we went a couple minutes long. So there you go. There's some breaking news at the end of this morning's program. David Gustafsson, a 2-year contract with the Winnipeg Jets.
We can go long if Murat wants to keep talking about it.
We can talk about it for a few more minutes.
I want to tell my story about being in Istanbul for this Galatasaray versus, I want to say, Manchester United maybe, or Manchester City, and they kept pointing at me saying, as if I was cheering for England. I'm like, I've got no affiliation. I have no consideration as to who is going to win. I'm happy for Galatasaray to win, but anyways, Drew, sorry, go on.
So there you go. Gustafsson, a 2-year deal, $835,000 is the AAV. Logan Stanley, a 2-year deal, $1.25 million. AAV for the big Jets left side defender. So that's 2 pieces of work done by Kevin Cheveldayoff there. You knew that those would be likely to be relatively easy contracts to do. The Gustafsson and the, I guess really not a lot of objection, I would suggest, from anybody on either of those. I mean, at the worst case scenario, you have another depth defenseman at an NHL level for a reasonable salary when it comes to Logan Stanley.
Yeah, I think for Winnipeg with those guys is just make a reasonable cap hit and let the roster spots fall where they may. And that's exactly what they did there. You saw the arbitration deadline come and go. Neither of these guys, Gustafsson or Stanley, have the minutes or the offensive totals to make big cases for big raises. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just a business as usual in terms of getting them locked up. Cole Perfetti would be the next major piece of business.
Yeah.
With Logan Stanley, though, I also think, remember, it's only a couple of years ago where he's gently saying, hey, look, I want to play. I want to be an everyday player. Move me if you can't do that.
Right.
And here he is signed to some more term at this stage as well. It's a pretty good sign for any, Jets with uncertain futures that sometimes roles change, futures change, context changes, and Stanley's locked for two more years.
And it's a reminder to Ville Heinola, look, you're going to have to go in and you're going to have to win that job if you want to be on the left side of the Jets defense, because, Logan Stanley is still here. I mean, people thought maybe it would only be a 1-year deal and then he'd be an unrestricted free agent after that, but he gets him for the Jets to take away one of those years of UFA status, and he's going to stick around. Gustafsson, to me, I think finally got some health last year. First of all, I mean, so when, especially later in the year, I saw a player playing with as much confidence as I think we've ever seen him play with, and I think that there's still a lot more to his game that I think you're going to see as he's developed into less. He looks like more of a man out on the ice in terms of his thickness and in terms of his size and in terms of his physical nature. Not that he's ever going to be a Wile E. Coyote player out there, but he's not bodied off the puck as much anymore. That there's more heft and substance to his game, and so I think that he can very easily outplay that 835 AAV over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think so, and he's the sort of player that I think you wake up one day a few years down the road and this player that's been in the organization for an awfully long time is suddenly just doing so well for his 4th or 3rd line minutes that you're like, wait a second, mm-hmm. Did I undersell this guy? It's like, no, he was just quietly doing the right things, trying to stay healthy. Obviously, that's been a concern for him. Right. But his reads are good, his work ethic is good, his strength is getting there. I'm not sure he's ever going to be a dominant player, but you're not getting a dominant player for 835.
No, but if he can come in and he can fill that 4th line role and just be a consistent force out there where you don't even have to sort of worry about him. Scott Arneal and the coaching staff know what he's going to give you most shift in and shift out. Well, at 835, that's a nice. It's a very nice price to have to pay.
Yeah, coaches love set it and forget it type of players. Yeah, like that's one less thing they have to worry about of the hundreds of things that they think about every single day.
Sure.
And I think David Gustafsson is that. It's also why you find out the coaches love Vladimir Mesnikov or Alex Iafallo or what have you. It's okay, they might not produce every single day, but you know what you're getting in terms of a work level, and you don't have to. There's nothing extra that they have to do to get those players to buy in and to deliver their best on a day.
Exactly right. So there you go. Let me just recap it one more time before we wrap up this morning's program. Some of us have family obligations, Dave. I know you would keep going, but I have to get to the wife and the kids.
I got to go do media. What are you talking
about?
Go do media.
Okay. Saturday. David Gustafsson, this just happening about 5 minutes ago. He signs a 2-year deal with the Winnipeg Jets. It's got an AAV, an average annual value, a salary cap hit of $835,000. And Logan Stanley, also a 2-year deal, a salary cap hit of $1.25 million for the next couple of years. So those two players will be members of the Winnipeg Jets, barring something unforeseen, for the next couple of seasons. Murat Atesh of The Athletic, thank you for joining us this morning here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Go Turkey! Look forward to that match happening later on this afternoon. We'll let you guys get to some of the media availability. Big thanks to everybody joining us here at the Hockey for All Center for this live on location edition of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We'll do this again.
I will take a moment to wish my dad a happy milestone birthday from yesterday.
Absolutely.
And my aunt, his younger sister. It's her milestone birthday as well. I won't reveal the number, but shout out to Auntie Maureen. Happy birthday to her. Hope she has a great rest of her day. And I know we had a great day for my dad. So shout out to those two.
There you go.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthdays all around. It's a celebratory mood here on the Saturday edition of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Big thanks to all of you for joining us. Big thanks to all of you who joined us online. Big thanks to producer Tim, doing a great job as always. We'll be back next Saturday for another edition of this program, 9 a.m. Central. For Dave Minuk, for Murat Atesh, for producer Tim, for Scotty Billick, for Paul Edmonds, for everybody under the sun who joined us this morning. Thanks everyone for joining us. This has been the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.